moving chairs. Please be seated. Right, welcome to the meeting of the Redcar Borough Council for today, the 29th of February. Can I ask you to switch off your mobile phones to silent? Most members will be aware of the recent death of a former councillor, Jean Kay, who served in the authority from 87 to 99, was a long-stander of the Borough Council and also a leader of the Lib Dems. Can you all be upstanding for 1 minute silence, please? Thank you. Please proceed. Right, apologies for absence. I've apologies from Councillor Bendlow, Clark, Kerr, Neil and Oliver. Is there any more?
Councillor Leroyd, I think, is on his way.
Any more? Thank you. There's a declaration of interest form on your desks. If anybody got a declaration of interest, please put it on the form. Thank you. Item 3 is to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the last meeting. Can I have a proposal, please?
I'd like to move an amendment to them minutes if possible, and that's to replace myself with Councillor Levin on the arm houses, as long as there's no objections from the floor.
We'll leave that later on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Can I propose that we accept the minutes? Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson.
I have an amendment to suggest on page 18. So 56.5, the question 5 was asked by Councillor Thompson, not Councillor Thompson. So could we have that appropriately amended, Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Can we accept that amendment, Councillor Cortemere?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I've also got an amendment. It's on page 14. It's kind of a moot point, but it's there. It's paragraph 4, line 2. It says obstruction instead of abstraction. I think it can create a bit of confusion there. Yeah. It says passenger obstruction. That doesn't really mean anything. It could mean something to somebody. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more amendments to it? Right, can I propose that we accept the minutes with those 2 amendments, please? Councillor Brown, seconder, please. Councillor, right. That's been passed. Just to note the attendance matrix, I don't think there's any query on that one. Right, receive announcements. The first is for myself. I'd like to thank all those councillors who've made a nomination for this year's Mayor's Community Award, Achievement Awards, which will take place on Wednesday, 27th of March in this chamber. Thank you. The second announcement is my charity ball will take place on Saturday, the 27th of April at Gisborne Hall. All proceeds will go to my two charities, Footprints in the Community, provide food banks and a variety of services to help the isolation, and the Junction Foundation, which supports children and young adults. I hope you'll be able to come along, and I'd like to see possibly a table from each group, please. So I'll throw it up to the group leaders to come back. Thank you. Councillor Alec Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and we'll get a table.
Thank you.
Since we last met, we have announced the details of two great events for the public. Elite level cyclists will return to our borough for the East Cleveland Classic in April. We will host both the men's and women's races, which will start and finish in Saltburn and go through East Cleveland. Previous cycling events have been really popular, and the public, and I'm sure people will turn out once again to watch the riders as they pass through where they live. I know me and my deputy went to Saltburn last time and it was great, wasn't it? In May, a new kite festival will be held on Redcar seafront. The festival will feature spectacular displays by kite experts and the opportunity for members of the public to learn the skills of flying a kite. There will also be food and entertainment to make a great day out for all the family. With the return of the music on the beach in Majuba, it is shaping up to be a great year for events in the summer. Now, for one, look forward to seeing the Libertines. Residents will have the opportunity to take up food and drink offers during this year's Taste of Redcar and Cleveland promotion. The promotion provides special offers for families to enjoy quality food and drink at any one of the 32 businesses which has signed up to take part. It runs until March the 10th, and I'm sure it will be popular as it has been in previous years. Our public park tennis courts will be refurbished after we secured more than £170,000 of funding from the Lawn Tennis Association. We would like all our residents to have the opportunity to be active, and this investment means that we will have quality facilities to try their hands at tennis. Our staff will be working hard to restore the Saltburn Cliff Lift tramway, as I'm sure many of the Saltburn councillors will be pushing us to make sure that's done and back to work in order. Members will be aware that the fire last month, which badly damaged the tramway, we've now had the opportunity to assess the damage, which is as serious as first feared. It will be an extensive job to restore the tramway, and it is too early to say when it will reopen, but we will aim to have it working as soon as possible. And again, you can be rest assured that the administration will be keeping a very close eye on developments with the tramway. It's so important to tourism and the people of Saltburn. Firstly, I would like to praise, finally, I would like to praise our staff who have once again taken decisive action to keep the public safe. Our colleagues in Trade and Standards investigate the sale of illegal cigarettes, tobacco and vapes, and this led to two businesses being closed down. A great deal of work goes into these investigations. I'm working closely with our legal team to bring the cases to court. It is another great result and a clear message to the small minority of businesses which break the law and affect the youth of our residents. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor. Any questions? No. Any announcements from the Cabinet members? No announcements from the Cabinet members. Any announcements from the Managing Director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just to remind members on that when we get to agenda item 8A, it will be a named recorded vote, and I'll go into the details of what I anticipate to get from you then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item 7, there's no questions from the general public being received. So we move on to item 8, which is 4 reports from. We remind you that it is for the mover to speak for 10 minutes, the second for 5, and the mover then may speak for a further 5 minutes. I think Councillor Massey is doing the first report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm moving this report, and Councillor Brown is going to second, I believe, and reserve his right to speak. So here we are again. For some of us, we've been here for many years, and this is the latest in a long line of challenging budgets that this local authority and our neighbouring and national partner local authorities have also had to set over the last, 13, 14 years. This is our final budget report. It's gone through extensive consultation, as it always does. We took this to Cabinet in December. We've took it again to Cabinet in February. It's been through the scrutiny cycle on both occasions. And I'm pleased to say that there's been a wide range of member involvement throughout that period, and even prior to that period. We held budget challenge and transformation sessions, which a number of members in this room from all parties and none attended. We also held 2 budget conferences, 2 all-member conferences. So I'm pleased that the budget that we have today has had an awful lot of input from both sides, all sides of the aisle. The challenging position that we have today is even worse than it was when we first set the draft budget back in December last year. So effectively, we are £2.2 million further away from where we were in December. Thankfully, the government has provided some funding to help mitigate the impact of some of this, but we still think that even with the 1.5 million that we may get from government, that we're going to be 0.7 million short, which we'll have to find in year. So this budget sets out, in terms of its recommendations, a 2.99% council tax rise, a 2% increase in the social care precept for adults, additional premiums for long-term MP properties, a business rate position of £41 million, of which the council share is roughly half, a required council tax amounts for the borough, the required council tax amounts, our investment programme, all the way to 28-29, a reserve position of 5%, a refreshed treasury management strategy, and the flexible use of capital receipts. There's a lot of technical detail in the budget, but I want to pull out some of the salient points. In essence, why are we in this position? Why do we have these conversations every year? Why did Councillor Nightingale say very similar things that I'm going to say today last year? Why have previous cabinet members said very similar things? Because local government in the United Kingdom is chronically underfunded. It has remained so for the best part of a decade. The Local Government Association, which is an apolitical body that looks after member councils such as ours, predicts that there's a £4 billion gap in terms of local government funding. Local government as a whole is £4 billion short of what it should have to provide the services that our community needs. The other major event that's happened in the last year that has given particular pressure this year is inflation. In the Consumer Spending Review of 2021, it was predicted that inflation would hit a high of 4%. We know now it hit a high of 11.1%. That's impacted our communities out there, but it's impacted us in here too. All the council's goods and services, some of our contracts, some of our wages have also had to go up by a similar amount. It's caused an extra strain on the budget. We also know that children in our care is an ever increasing financial challenge to the council. That's not to say those children shouldn't be provided for. They absolutely should. It's a moral and a legal right. But the number of children in our care is now 403. It's almost an all-time high. It's gone up about 100, maybe 90 in the last 2 years. And the very basic maths that I've shared with some members who've had conversations with me this week has been that we predicted that the average cost of a child in our care would be £250,000. This year it's gone up to £350,000 on average each. We have 403 of them. It's a tremendous strain on the budget. That's not to say those children shouldn't be looked after. Once again, they absolutely should. We also know the living wage, which I think is a wonderful thing, both the Redcar and Cleveland living wage that we have here, but also the national living wage has also uplifted the lowest paid in our societies. We predicted, as did other councils in the UK, it would go up to just into the £11. This is the government's living wage, not the foundation living wage or the council's, which is slightly higher than the government's wage. But actually, instead of being 11.16, which we and other councils predicted, it's 11.44. Again, those members of staff deserve that pay, but it has a financial impact on the council. There's a medium-term financial strategy built into this budget. What we are approving today is the 2024 to 2025 budget for this local authority, but we also look ahead and have a 5-year medium strategy, but the budget is an annual decision. So you may recall, those who were here last time around, that the budget last year had a medium-term financial strategy, which also expected to put the council tax up 2.99% and put a 2% adult social care levy on. So we are continuing on that path because no alternatives have developed over the last financial year to allow us to go on a different one. We have a £2.2 million budget gap despite the work we've already done and despite the work that we plan to do. You'll notice in one of the appendices, Appendix 3, it talks about some of the service investments and service cuts that are effectively going to be needed. That's a huge challenge moving forward. Even after doing all of that, we still will be short. We'll be having these conversations again with all members as we go through over the next year to try and get this council in the most sustainable place possible. But it is a challenge, and a challenge that we're not alone in. Indeed, some of our neighbouring authorities are further down the road in terms of how bad this can get. The report also talks about fees and charges, which is a report that was approved by Cabinet back in December. It talks about the number of homes in the area, which has gone up by 400, 126. It talks about the council tax, and I appreciate as a council taxpayer myself that it is a challenge when council tax goes up. I appreciate that people in our community make very difficult decisions because budgets go up, inflation has been high, etc., etc. But I just want to dispel a myth that is often said out there, I've certainly seen on social media, that Redcar and Cleveland Council has the highest council tax, one of the highest council tax. It does not. Of the 12 local authorities in the northeast, Redcar has the third lowest council tax of all 12. The challenge that we have, though, is some rich areas in London, which have large-scale businesses, do have smaller council tax bases than ours. That's a real challenge and speaks to a national need to redress what is council tax, how we fund local government. It's long overdue. It's not been looked at since the 1990s, effectively. The report also talks about debt, which is 17% of our revenue budget. This is a concern. It's one of the only ways we can do excellent schemes out there with capital funding, but equally that is quite high. It averages at £1,300 a person for our residents, which is high, but not as high as some other authorities which have been in financial trouble recently. Woking averages at 18,000 per resident. Thurrock averages at 8,000 per resident. I couldn't find a figure for Birmingham, but I know it owes £3 billion. It's an incredible challenge that exists everywhere in local government. The report also talks about business rates, which has no growth based in the budget for next year, but some growth, £1.5 million in 2025 and £1 million in 2026 based on T's works. There are some rainbows on the horizon. They're not here yet, and they're not that large yet. Maybe something will address our problems in the future. I hope that it does. But today we cannot bank on those things happening in the next financial year, so we have to make difficult decisions today. We're increasing funding in children's services, given some of the issues I talked about earlier, increasing funding in adult services, and also having to increase our pay budget, which is staff's right. Staff work very hard, and they've worked incredibly hard in this budget and all the areas in the local authority. The report talks about capital investment. It talks about in Appendix 3 the cuts that are needed, 7.5 million the next financial year. Effectively, we are in this worst position, like I said. It's been 13 or 14 years of this, and even since December, things have sadly got worse. We were consulting in the past on a budget that was basically balanced, but now we're consulting on a budget that still has a £0.7 million gap, despite government coming in and giving local authorities 600 million. As I said, the LGA says local authorities are underfunded by 4 billion. So it's gone some way to meet our gap, but it's not gone all the way. It's gone some way to meet the nation's gap, but by no means all of the way. The report talks about the consultation that's taken place with the public. We've got 285 responses. The budget is a difficult decision, though, and it's a difficult decision for all of us to have to make today. No one party rules this council. That is why, as we always should in my opinion, we have consulted so widely, we've had conversations across the aisles. But I just want to point out some facts that are not political. These are all from established resources. The Local Government Chronicle reported this week that 70% of councils this year will have to use reserves, and 2/3 of councils are planning cuts to neighbourhood or waste collection services. The Local Government Information Unit have reported that 9 out of 10 councils will raise council tax by the maximum. The Local Government Association has highlighted the £4 billion gap that I've mentioned. The Guardian yesterday, and we are not one of these councils, but the Guardian yesterday said that 1 in 10 local authorities in this country will go bust in the next year when they ask financial leaders of those authorities. 8 English councils have declared themselves bankrupt since 2018. 4 of them have done so in the last year. When councils go bankrupt, when 114 notices are issued, the power gets taken away from us. The council tax in those areas has gone up starkly. In Birmingham by 21% in the next 2 years. In Woking by 10%. In Thurrock by 8%. I know 5% is difficult. We don't want to get into a situation where it's 21, 10 or 8. My plea today is for councillors to recognise the position this council is in, of no fault of its own, of no fault of some of our neighbouring authorities' own, because local government is underfunded. The budget has been consulted upon with all of you many times. We've had great ideas, we've had consultation, we've had transformation sessions. The Section 151 officer, Phil Winstanley, speaks to groups, asks for alternatives, will consider alternatives if they're brought to him, but my plea today is, if there is no alternative from you for this budget, vote for this budget. I've asked council staff over the last week to give me a cost for what it will cost this authority if this budget is not passed today. And that cost is £2.3 million. The reason it is so high is if we do not pass this budget today, the council tax bills that we would issue would not go out to our residents on time. They would be delayed by a month. This will mean the council will have £9.8 million less in its bank accounts to spend on goods and services. May also potentially mean we need extra staff to then print and publish those letters to send out those bills. It is a £2.3 million cost. My final plea is for members to put this council, its budget, its finances first. By making these difficult decisions, we keep these decisions in our hands. We don't get government in, we don't get council tax rises that are unaffordable for the vast majority of our residents. We don't want to raise council tax, we don't want to cut services, we don't want to increase charges. But in this financial climate, unfortunately, the answer to all of those questions, pleas and challenges is unfortunately we have to. As I've said, if there's no alternative to this budget, I pray that members here today pass the budget because we are in a difficult position financially, as are all of our neighbours. Redcar and Cleveland is not alone in this, but the solutions to Redcar and Cleveland's problems are in the papers that we have in front of us today, and I plead for you to vote for them. Thank you. I move the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Does Councillor Brown as a seconder wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, is it possible if I can wait for some of the contributions and then come in and reserve the right? Can I do that? Yeah, okay.
It's right. It's now open to members if they wish to speak. Right. Councillor Selvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would first like to thank the officers and staff who have prepared this budget for us today. We all know that it takes an incredible amount of time and effort over the course of the year, and for that, I know our group appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, at the AGM last year, the leader of the council stood up, looked us all in the eye, talked about how he wanted to work with each and every one of us, no matter our politics, to allow this minority-controlled council to function. This concept sounded great, but it didn't last long. In fact, it didn't last beyond the AGM, when it became clear that Labour and the Liberal Democrats had done a backdoor deal behind the scenes to close us out of everything. His contempt for the second biggest party in this chamber was for all to see. Ever since, we've seen the cracks appear, and today we will see for ourselves how united this administration is. Will the Lib Dems continue to prop up and support this Labour administration by voting for this budget? Or will they see sense, reject this budget, and finally call time on the marriage made in hell? The third option, however, is what Lib Dems do best, and that is sit on the fence and abstain in the hope that this budget gets through so that they can claim that they were no part of it. Let's not forget, though, they are a large part of this administration and they support it every day. Any abstention from any member of this council, from any member of the Liberal Democrats today, is allowing for Labour's appalling budget to be passed. Mr. Mayor, even though we have a Lib Lab coalition in all but name, the leader has continued to tell us he wants us all to work together for the benefit of this council. To this day, 9 months later, we Conservatives are still awaiting for an invite to do precisely that, work together. The only meetings I have had contact with the leader are ones that I've instigated myself, and the only time he's reached out to me was last week when he was fishing to find out how we were voting. How is this us all working together? We had the sham budget roundtable meetings in which we were all invited to give our opinions on things so that Labour could pretend they had listened to us, take nothing we had said seriously, then implement absolutely nothing we had suggested. All in the name of a PR exercise so the leader can say that we have all worked together on this budget. We tried to bring a motion to full council in our very first meeting regarding parking charges and the effects that would have on local businesses. We weren't listened to. In fact, we were blamed for it. Yes, you did hear that right, Mr. Mayor, blamed for it. We, as the official opposition on this council that makes no decisions within it, were blamed for the introduction of parking charges. Truly baffling. Now we find out Labour's mayoral candidate is promising free parking for everyone across the TVCA, which solves a problem that Labour created in the first place. And let's not forget, They promised free parking in the borough prior to May 2023 elections, then reneged on these two. I suppose when your party is devoid of ideas, if you create a problem that wasn't there, then fix it, you'll look, well, devoid of ideas. The bin tax is another issue I can't support, and whilst it's not officially on this budget, councillors were not consulted or given a vote on this significant funding change. To make matters worse, the leader himself told residents that they can put this waste in general waste. So why would anyone sign up for this ludicrous scheme? The leader was very honourable taking the bin tax to Cabinet for Cabinet to decide, or was it that he knew this issue would be defeated with a council vote in this chamber? More signs that the Lib Lab coalition is breaking at the seams. Mr. Mayor, one thing I need to make absolutely clear is since the formation of this unitary authority over 30 years ago, the Conservatives have never had a majority control of this council, and it's telling when you look at the amount of money that is being wasted in procurement. We have brought this up on numerous occasions in committee meetings and at full council over the past 9 months. Procurement needs to be the priority of this budget, and once again it is severely lacking an acknowledgement that there is even a problem here. Well, there is. The 5 Conservatives representing Eston and Nornby wards were appalled by the prices that we were being quoted for Christmas lights. So Councillor Dave Taylor took it upon himself to make some inquiries last autumn. Credit where credit is due. He did get help from the Cabinet member, Councillor Chris Massey, on this, but all it took was a few phone calls, a few emails, and the council saved a whopping £22,000. Now that is teamwork, and that is how you solve problems in this council, when we work together. Imagine the savings that could be had across this borough if we actually work together at rooting out these overspends. In another issue, Councillor Stephen Martin got lighting fixed at the underpass of Greystones roundabout. He got 2 independent quotes off 2 local tradesmen for £3,000 to £3,500, same spec lighting, only for this council to pay 200% more. Yes, that's right, 200%. The actual price for £3,500 lights was £9,865. Now, I know the council signs long-term contracts in advance, which naturally adds a premium, but over £6,000 more expensive for such a small job. Really? This is not acceptable. Labour needs to get a grip of the systemic issue within our council, and I request that all councillors start to question jobs being completed in their wards, like we have in ours. And if you smell a rat, call it out, send the appropriate emails, make the appropriate calls. This should be the priority for this council right now, and the council needs to get a grip on this situation immediately. For this council to bury its head in the sand once again over the issue of procurement is another opportunity missed. These procurement savings could help drive down residents' council tax bills, pay for green bins that are to be collected for free, and offer free parking across the borough. So having heard all this and seen the residents are once again of the poorest region in the country asked to stump up another 5% rise in council tax, is it right and fair that we do so when there's so many things that we can sort out within house first? To ask me as an opposition councillor to support this budget when there are so many issues left with it isn't fair. The residents of Redcar and Cleveland already pay some of the highest council tax in the country. Another 5% is expected of them this year, and this is the second year in a row a 5% increase is being asked of them. Are residents aware that for every £1 they give in council tax, 17 pence is going straight to the banks to pay down interest on loans? That's right, 17% of every pound in council tax is paying down the debt of the disastrous decisions made by consecutive Labour administrations within this council over the past 3 decades. Mr. Mayor, in conclusion, despite the rumour mill going wild...
From speaking?
I'm in conclusion now, Alec. Mr. Mayor, in conclusion, despite the rumour mill going wild on social media, I can assure everyone, including Councillor Leroyd himself, that no back deals are being done behind the scenes between ourselves and the Labour Party. For all the reasons I've stated in this speech, I will be rejecting this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Julie Hart.
you, Mr. Mayor. As an elected member and paid representative to be a voice of my ward, Hutton, I will be really upset if anybody does abstain on this budget today. We are either in favour of this budget or we are not. We are paid by our residents to give them a voice, and that voice does not mean we sit on a fence so that we can't be blamed either way, whichever way this budget goes. We're also one of 11,930 councils within this country. Not all 11,930 councils can't manage their money, and I think it's terrible that we're being blackmailed to say if we don't pass this budget today that it's going to cause more mayhem. We're here to work for our residents, and that's what we should be doing. Given the fact the budget will still be in deficit and the Cabinet are still happy to borrow money for things like second pools, I see no reason to take our residents' back teeth out, while meantime driving our local economy further into the ground. This budget will hit the lower and middle working class people in our area that are already hard hit by rising costs. This budget not only is asking for an extra 4.99% in council tax revenue from these hard-working people, it is also asking them to shell out for the following, which I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about today: the green bin waste tax. Looking on analysis, I think this extra tax, above and beyond the 4.99% increase, will cost far more to implement than it will to reap in revenue. I fear that we will only be left with just one dusty bin at the end of the day. How will this be monitored? How will our collectors know who has paid and who has not, and at what cost? How much more money on advertising will we spend to get this white elephant off the ground? Use the advertising space on paid advertising to generate an income instead. Back to my best love for my residents of Gisborough, and that's parking. Our hard-working residents are now expected to pay £8 for 3 hours in order for them to boost their local economy and keep their dying high streets alive. We will make more revenue than we are now by lowering this ridiculous cost. Again, as I ask you, use the advertising space on paid advertising to generate an income instead. We need a clear way to check what we are paying for works, and as Councillor Selvin has said, we can do far more with our procurement. Thousands of pounds could be saved by scrutinising these payments rather than just letting things go through under £10,000. And I also think we should be looking at these things on our scrutiny committees. We do not need to be frightened to challenge the cost of services that seem to be taking our back teeth out. If we look back in November, there was a fee agreed for just under £250,000 for one child for a 14-week placement period of an apprenticeship. And I don't begrudge the child the apprenticeship. But what I do begrudge, when we were 9 million in deficit, that for 1 year you would be equating another £1 million on top of that for one placement. It's not good housekeeping.
Can I ask you to start concluding, please?
Yeah, I would like to see empty and part-use buildings let out and used to full capacity in general income services pooled. A vital service like our libraries, that are a lifeline and a social hub to many, cannot possibly be removed, and instead we should be utilising those buildings, renting out rooms and making them more economical. Thank you.
Thank you. There have been 5. Councillor Glenn Nightingale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm a bit surprised. I thought this was about a budget, not what the Liberal Democrats actually do. And there are several factual points. The Conservatives were in power between 2003 and 2007 in coalition, yes. But we did work together and collaboratively in any case. Let's just look at what the real issues are in this particular case. First of all, it's the ingredients of the budget, and then it's the level of local taxation, and then the financial consequences of not passing this budget for the services of the council and the financial issue of the council. I think it's very important to recognise that by passing this budget, we are not actually in detail committing this amount of money to spend. It is not set in concrete, in other words. Events take place during the year which shape the budget. And I think it's important that we recognise in some parts of this that there are really some considerably peculiar estimates. For a start, in terms of the service investments, what is the exact spending going to be? 2 out of the 17 actually just are rounded to 1,000. What is the basis for the calculation of this? In the saving proposal, all are rounded to 1,000. I just want to give 5 samples of this. What is the basis for the calculation for the income from fees and charges? What's going to be the response of the public to the increases in the charges? Secondly, there is an item that says reviewing opportunities at Kirkleatham Museum. What does this mean? What's the outcome going to be of this particular review? There's a 200,000 cut in smoking cessation. All of this is going to be cut, or what was the figure before that? And of course, this is also linked to the health improvement issue, which is part of the next issue, which is about the £250,000 savings of the review of the offer, which it says, review the offer provided by community development and the health improvement teams. Who made the offer? What does it mean? It's been widely criticised that we're going to be joining the CDOs and the health improvement teams together. There's a 200,000 review of the planning funding. What's the likely outcome of that? So it's very important to recognise then that, and it's crucial in terms of how the budget will be implemented, never mind the unforeseen circumstances that might arise. Next, and I think it's very important to recognise the points that were made by Councillor Massey about the consequences of failure to pass this budget. No one here wants to have the consequences that were mentioned by Councillor Massey. And I think several of the points that he made were the ones I made last year when I presented the 2023 budget. I think it's said that 20% of there's a 20% council tax increase in Birmingham. Do we want to go into that situation? And I think we've got to recognise then that there are practical issues that we have to deal with if we do not pass this vote. And the political consequences that would arise here, it would effectively mean that there's a vote of no confidence in the present administration. That's up to members to review. But it is absolutely essential that we provide the council with the resources, and this leads to the council tax increase. 90% of councils in the country are actually going to be increasing their council tax by the maximum amount. Just
start
less
bringing
than
it to conclusion,
5%.
please.
So I think it's important that when we're making these decisions, we recognise, first of all, the reality, not the unreality. Secondly, the practical problems that we're facing here and avoiding tolerating chaos. And secondly, to make a rational decision in terms of providing the resources that the council needs in order to do the job, rather than taking populist positions, which are so easy to take, and in the end, ultimately, lead to the sort of problems that people like Liz Truss faced and the previous councillor, Prime Minister Mr Johnson. So to conclude then, I think it's important that we ensure that the council has the resources to do the job, and it's important that the Resources Committee during the year is scrutinising exactly what is being spent to ensure that the people of this borough get the benefits of council services they deserve.
Thank you. I have a long list of members who want to speak, so I'm going to make sure that I stick to the 5 minutes, please. Councillor Leroy.
Thank you very much. Just to remind members, I'm not the council leader. The speech from Councillor Salvin would make you believe I'm the leader of the council, but in fact, I am not a member of the council, a leader of the council. I'm just going to mention in terms of we're in a situation where our children will have a lower standard of living than we have. And this is the result of austerity, prolonged austerity over the last 14 years. We're now in a situation where 5 families in the UK own more than 70% of the population. This is unacceptable. At the same time, the signs of austerity are all around us. When I was a member of this council back in 2011, there were over 1,000 members of staff. The corridors were packed. You would get coffee, sandwiches at the door. Now you don't. And the problem is with this group here, and I'm not going to get into a situation of party political red versus blue versus yellow, because I think the people have had enough of that, right? What I'm going to talk about is there's a misconception in this corner of the room between economy and finance. You think that running a council or running a government is like family finances. Now, I've not been in this situation, but imagine you were, where your family finances are sliced and sliced and sliced over the years to the point where someone comes along and says, you're just badly managing your finances. Let me take away that cooker. You're just badly managing your finances. Let me switch off the lights. Because that's the situation we find ourselves in. Here, today, we can either vote for more austerity, which is what Labour are imposing, but the Labour group are imposing that because they're being told to do it by the government. Because the alternative, and if we vote with yourselves, the Conservative group, is between a 10 and 20% council tax increase. Yes, it is, because we've seen it elsewhere, and that's what happens when a section notice is served. We mustn't lie to the public. We must be honest. Now, the situation that Councillor Hart raised with regards to, and I know she runs a small business, and I know there are others run small business here, but the reason why people can't afford to go in the shops is because their livelihoods, their own work conditions have deteriorated over the last 14 years to such a point where they don't have the expendable cash. They don't have the expendable cash. There's a lucky few who are richer today than they were then. That is the situation. The middle class in this country is shrinking. And if we continue to attack the middle class through austerity measures, which only serve the very richest in society, and we continue to increase inequality like we are at the rate that it's increasing, and we're responsible in this Chancellor Chamber for these decisions as well, because we are part of that establishment making their decisions, then what will happen, I'm talking economics here, please don't talk over me, what will continue to happen is the middle class will decrease and decrease and decrease in size, and it will lose its spending power. Now, I just want to touch on one final point, and it's this, because I saw it in a report, Mr. Archer's report, when he first came to the council, and it was this idea that Tees Works would save us. And we heard there from Councillor Salvin where he talked about £22,000 being saved with regards to lights, or we looked at this procurement object. Again, just slicing the salami. I would remind him that over 125 million of money that was destined to come to this council from Tees Works won't, because of your mayor, who you're supporting's building of an oligarchy. That's what's happening, rewarding rich individuals rather than rewarding the taxpayer. We are having this is being imposed on us today by the Tees mayor, and we all need to be a bit braver in saying it. He should have handed down money to this council. He should have been a more successful businessman and negotiator, and he's been the poorest of the poor. And that's why today, people who can't afford the bills are going to have to pay a higher council tax bill. And those who are unfortunate and can't afford to pay the council tax bill in the first place will then see services reduced. So I'll be abstaining, and the reason why I abstain is nothing to do with yellow supporting reds. The reason why I'm abstaining is because back in 2012, I made a pledge that I would never support austerity, and it cost me of a cabinet position, and it cost me, if I wanted it, a political career, and I was thrown out of the Labour Party in the end. And I
Any
stick by that
conclude,
decision
please?
today. I will not be voting with austerity.
Against. None of us are going to abstain. But if this situation, one thing we agree on is that we can't go on as we are. If this situation continues, where are we going to get the new councillors from? Who would want to sit here? If you consider what this is like, what it looks like and sounds like from the position of a new councillor, they take the concerns and the hopes and the complaints of their communities and they get themselves elected and they come here to do something about them. And then what do they find? They find themselves here today. And they're asked to continue that process of putting up council tax and voting for cuts. And then they find out that some councillors are intending not to vote either way, but to do that weak and watery thing called abstaining, to remove themselves from the most important decision that we make concerning our residents in the whole year in order apparently not to get the blame. And if they show more backbone than that and decide to vote against the budget, well, then come the threats. The threat that individual councillors can be held liable, personally liable, if they obstruct the budget. That the government will send in commissioners and will take away those newly earned democratic powers that they've just received. It has been an extremely difficult time for the independent group. We've had a very tense sense of responsibility in discussing this budget. And I think really in the future, if we have to have that sense of responsibility for whether the budget is going to be passed or not, then we also need rights. We need detailed information about decision making when we ask for it, not half a year, or a year and a half afterwards. And we need a say in decision making. I think it's hard, perhaps, for some of the executive to come to terms with the fact that there are 33 councillors who are not in administration in this council. My own reasons for reluctantly supporting the budget. I've talked to Councillor Brown. We've put our doubts and our objections and our concerns about the budget, and I'd like to thank him for making a start in the direction of addressing those concerns and our requests. Obviously, I can't make him keep his promises, but he knows as well as I do we'll be back here again next year. I also feel that if the budget fell, that the budget that would have to be brought back within a week would not look very different. The only thing that could be different is that it would have more cuts in it that most members would not want to vote for. And I don't think that would resolve the situation. And I feel it wouldn't be much different because of the conversations I've had with the Chief Finance Officer in terms of what he's prepared to accept. Also, I think the political makeup of this chamber now means that there is no other group or combination of groups who would be prepared to work together that could get a budget passed. And so I'm keen to avoid the chaos that would result. But to any councillors who are planning to abstain, I would say that if you think you'll avoid getting the blame, think again. Look what's happening in Birmingham now. Those councillors this week are being forced to vote on a 10% increase in council tax this year, a 10% increase next year, and £360 million worth of cuts, which is almost our entire budget. And if they don't, then the staff won't get paid.
Can you come
And
to a
of course,
conclusion, please?
they are blaming the government. And to some extent, that's justified, perhaps not entirely justified in their case. But the people on the streets are blaming the council. So if we ended up in that situation, it would be all of us getting the blame. It would be all of our reputations that were tarnished, I think, if we came to that situation. I've finished. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ian Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure we all in this chamber could look at any budget and find things we don't like in it. My concerns are more in the implementation of the budget going ahead. What I see in this budget in terms of savings is cuts in staff. That's probably inevitable that people are going to look for that. But in doing that, of course, we lose intellectual property. And we've all seen what happens when we lose intellectual property in the last 12 months. Look at what happened to Beyond Housing last year when they outsourced their cutting of the grass to an outsourced service. They lost a key person within that organisation, and the result of that was not just bad publicity for them, we got the blame. Because people outside of this chamber see us as responsible just for anything Beyond Housing does as we do. I would not like to see that happen in the next 12 months. The same is the change of the CDOs. Again, intellectual property there is going to be lost, because as far as I can see from all these reviews, I can't actually see where this merger of health and the role the CDOs do at the present time is going to bring benefit to this. It's going to go to, it's a push towards a health service. We're moving people from what they do now and helping councillors to doing the health role within that particular directorate. I would just like to say that I hope other members like myself will look at the scrutiny of what this council does over the next 12 months with this budget. Because it's a budget, it's not exactly how it's going to be spent. But the consequences of those decisions can be bad for us as a group, as councillors, and for the authority. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just having a moment there, listening to the end of that speech from the last councillor, because I was quite positive he was chair of one of the scrutiny committees, was he? No, vice chair. Anyway, just thought what he'd been doing for the last 12 months. Scrutinising. Anyway, I think Councillor Massey picked up on one of these points here, but I'm going to read extracts of it just in case no councillors have read it. So the LGA and obviously the LGIU have sent out some notices this last few days just to councils and councillors, warning of council bankruptcies. More than half of council chiefs saying that they are likely to go bust during the next parliament unless funding changes. 9% of councils are likely to go bust this next financial year, which is 14 councils in this country. This council's lack of revenue support funding, combined with inflation and rising need in adult children's social care and homelessness and SEND services, has stretched council's spending power to the brink. This year's State of Local Government Finance report has revealed that there are desperate, ruinous financial situations in all local councils nearly. Cutting services and borrowing more money and spending reserves year after year is completely unsustainable. Our citizens are being failed year after year. With half of councils warning that they are at risk of bankruptcy within the next parliament, it is no longer possible to blame individual councils' governance issues. It is clear that the issue is systemic. To this council, and I mentioned it the other day when we had a session with the leader and with Councillor Massey, that this council seems to have a medium-term and long-term boom or bust culture based on tease works. A lot of the decisions that are taken this year are potentially decisions that will get the money back in a couple of years' time, or we'll be in a position where we'll probably be on one of those percentages of councils that will go bust if the money doesn't come in. There's a lot of politics when it comes to council tax. Now, council tax is one of those where it's like the government suggesting that councils can make the decisions locally because we're best placed to make decisions for the people that we represent. But by giving you less money all over the country, and by giving people, well, which is absolutely fair enough and just, giving people wage rises so that they've got more money in the pocket to pay the council tax that we're going to have to put up. So it's like making everybody look good, but then making all of us look bad because we're the councils, and everyone hates councils and councillors because we all get to see it every day when we're always getting the blame for things when things like this happen. It's all politics, as they say. Now, we all sat here again in the members' conferences and we were all given ideas out there, and some of us got the information back about what some of those suggestions were that we were going to put in, and I haven't seen, and I mentioned it the other day as well, haven't seen anything that was in any of the suggestions put forward into this budget for this year. So, you know, for me that's just been a complete waste of time. But moving on, Mr. Mayor, I think the most critical part is obviously the CDO issue for me, and as it's been mentioned there, CDOs play an important role especially in my community, and not only my community, in communities around mine, because the same person covers that same area. By adding more workload into that role and having what they call a pool system, is, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen enough of a job description, what is being proposed in the role, whether pooling is still the plan or isn't the plan, will health still be included in this new role, or is it likely to change? But we've had nothing in writing to confirm that support, just a commitment from the leader that certain people might still be in the role or still might not be in the role, depending on whether there's job things or not. But I'll finish off anyway, Mr. Mayor. As a horse racing fan, I'm an avid watcher of events such as Cheltenham and the Grand National when it's on TV, which is apt because it's on TV shortly. Being the end of a marathon jump running season is a bit like electoral terms of office. Now, last year, the current administration got the support of the team in yellow to form the new administration, but unfortunately, at the first political hurdle set in the budget, potentially they won't live up to support it. Now, if this budget falls today, it won't be my fault. It won't be the independent group's fault. It won't be Councillor Clark's fault. It won't be, never mind. When placing your bets, it's always difficult to know who to pick. Who will last the distance? Who will jump when required? Our AGM is in May, and you can make your bets now, please, because the last one was a non-starter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Alec Brown.
Yeehaw! Right, first of all, I'd just like to thank the sensible people that have got up and spoke and dissected the budget, and and have dissected the budget and talked about the reasons why or why they can't vote for it. But what we witnessed at the first speaker, the leader of the Conservative Party, was 10 minutes of populism, 10 minutes of party before people. There was 4 minutes attacking me, 4 minutes attacking the Liberal Democrats, a minute of blabber, a waffle, and a minute talking about Bob the Builder who does electric lights for £3,000. That's the Conservative answer to 1 in 10 councils around the country going bust. The LGA, the Local Government Association, issuing warnings about public spending. And your answer, Paul, is Bob the Builder in Ested who can do electric lights for £3,000. That's the alternative. Across all these papers, there's not an alternative budget from you. Voting against this budget when your own government are telling us to raise money locally because they've spent it all on PPE and contracts to people that don't exist, and your alternative budget is to try and talk about car parking that the mayor stopped and our mayor, if elected, will renew, and garden waste, and Bob the builder in Eston, who does the lights for £3 grand. Gallery, this is what the council has to put up with. Populism like that. No alternatives, no sensibility. You're talking about a £3,000, as you've heard from the LGA, from Councillor Massey and Councillor Davies. The low-lying fruit just doesn't exist anymore, Councillor Salvin. Blaming mismanagement or misspending of funds isn't good enough. It doesn't wash with the public anymore. If you look on social media, a lot of people understand. This is why the Conservatives are losing by-election after by-election after by-election. And this is the reason why they're going to lose the general election, because they're bringing politics before people. None of us here want to make any of the decisions in this budget, but we understand that children, elderly people, disabled people, families struggling, as Tristan Leroy mentioned, will struggle if we don't make difficult decisions. I make a plea to you and to all the councillors, put people before politics.
Councillor Quartermain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Austerity has already taken toll on our community. Since assuming my role as councillor in 2015, I've witnessed a steady erosion of hopes, aspirations, and opportunities for our residents, businesses, and infrastructure. We used to call it shaping our future. I called it shaving our future, but in truth, it's been more than a shave. Our workforce has been halved, vital services have been slashed, and discretionary services have been drastically curtailed. But amidst these challenges, we must not lose sight of our duty to protect those who depend on us most. While none of us relishes the prospect of raising council tax, we must confront the harsh reality that ensures essential services continue to run. Fees and charges can only stretch so far, and government funding simply does not cover our costs. I urge councillors to approach the decision making here today with open minds and a shared commitment to our civic responsibilities and as corporate parents. Our primary goal above all else is to safeguard the well-being of our residents and preserve the essential services upon which they rely. Not passing a budget is to ignore the responsibility we are entrusted to do. We find ourselves at a critical juncture. In fact, we are coming to a head, grappling with financial challenges that have become all too familiar to us and councils across the country. Since 2010, austerity measures have inflicted deep cuts to central government funding, leaving local authorities, including our own, in an increasingly precarious position. Stark realities are that government funding to local councils has plummeted by over 40% in the last 14 years. Meanwhile, the demand for adult social care has surged to unprecedented levels, placing immense strain on our already stretched resources. And just a month ago, Michael Gove and the Levelling Up Department underscored the expectation of a maximum 4.99% increase in council tax across the country. Sadly, we cannot ignore this instruction because the consequences of non-compliance are dire, as evidenced by the alarming rise in Section 114 notices issued by councils teetering on the brink of financial collapse. Not passing a budget leads us closer to this reality. Going bust used to be rare until recently. Perhaps many of you may not even have heard of what a Section 114 is, but it's becoming increasingly commonly used to describe a council's financial distress. A Section 114 is a report from the Council's finance officer that they believe that an authority is about to incur expenditure that is unlawful. It's really important as councillors that we understand this and the consequences. Councils are legally bound to balance their books, so the issuing of a Section 114 notice is a last resort. Since 2018, there have been 12 Section 114s declared by 8 English councils: Croydon, Northamptonshire, Nottingham, Slough, Northumberland, Thurrock, Woking and Birmingham. Many others have declared they are likely to go the same way in the next 5 years. The consequences of this, of course, is the government coming in to take over the council's spending, and aside this meaning selling off assets, removing discretionary services, raising fees and charges to unprecedented levels, it would of course mean raising council tax to the maximum level year on year and even beyond the cap altogether. 4 of these councils, Birmingham, Woking, Slough and Thurrock, have been given special dispensation by the government to raise council tax beyond the cap. Year on year, these authorities see the maximum rise.
Can I ask you to conclude, please?
And we've heard that Birmingham are making these rises 21% over the next 2 years, Croydon 15%, others 10%, and many others above 5%. I'll just finish off now. So today, let us stand united in our resolve to support this budget. Let us make the difficult decisions that are required to shield our residents from the potential of even greater hardship. Thank you.
Councillor Barry Hunt.
Well, last year I was sat there. We listened to the same things, we'd had the same things from the officers, we put our budget, and we were begging people to go for it. Because, you know, at the end of the day, the officers were saying we haven't got this, we've got that. So we had to make decisions, and I sat there. And I've, even to the day when we were sat there, I was that far off not voting for it. And I was on the cabinet. So, you know, I'm not got things written down and going on. I'm speaking from the heart. And if people don't like that, well, I'm sorry, but that I'm speaking as I see it. I've had that much for a bad time over thinking about it and going on. We've discussed it and discussed. I was nearly there. The other Borough councillors, we talk about things and try to come to agreements with each other. And I mean, I've even had a bad enough time. I had a bad dream. I was putting the bin out, the rubbish in the bin, and Alec popped out and said, "Well, what's the alternative?" That was in the middle of my dream. So that's how bad it's been. Anyway, so I've right up to this morning, last night, I never slept and everything like that, because you do see what's going on, and you see, I know what's going on all over the country. It was all on television all day yesterday. How many councils are doing this and what's this? And the threat is there. We're going to have the threat next year. So what I did was I was getting in the car to drive out, and I drove up to the community centre. And there was people in there having the breakfast and things like that. There was a few in. So I asked them, I said, I've got to make an important decision today. What do you want me to do? I explained to them about the budget. I explained to them about how everybody thinks to just get the bins emptied and the roads fixed and the grass cut. Don't realise the rest of it's children's services, adult services. I explained all that to them. Being the cabinet member, and I mean, I feel, what if he had taken out of it £2 million out of the budget? You know, that's, you can't cut anymore. The bones, you're through the bone now. And so I asked these people, and I explained to them, and from my heart, I cannot look them in the face. Every one of them said, stick up for us. And, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, they're not going to get. We're putting the council tax up. You've got to do that, because that's what's the thing. But we should be voting on, we should be voting on putting the council tax up and giving them a service for what they're paying for. They're not going to get a service for what they're paying. We can't do it now. And it's going to get worse next year because we've got less staff to do things. We're not going to be able to do the roads and do the things. You're going to have the hardest time, and I feel sorry for you. And Chris, I have a lot of respect for you, and I appreciate every bit of work that's gone in from all of you. I appreciate it because we had to do it. We sat there and we had to do the same. So I've got to say that from my heart, I cannot look people in the eye that I live with. I always use a phrase, I live on the ground with the turkeys. I don't soar with the eagles. I know all the eagles, but I live on the ground with the turkeys, and I know what goes on, and I know how people are suffering and what they're going, because I live there. And these people are telling me to stick up for them, and I've got to go against it. I'm sorry for that reason, that I can't look people in the eye and not give them what they're paying for. You wouldn't walk in a shop and pay a lot more for what you were getting half the pie that you used to buy. Well, you do with chocolates and things like that, don't you? But at the end of the day, I'm just speaking from the heart, and I know everything that you're trying to do, I appreciate it, but I've got to do what I think, and I'm standing by the people that I represent. They told me this morning, and that's why that's what swayed me, because they told me. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for not telling me to shut up like you usually do. So, and you know, I'm sorry. Yeah. Right, thank you.
Councillor Luke Myers.
I wasn't planning to speak in this debate, but I have to say I was astonished by the pre-written remarks from the Conservative Party, which was simply to blame Labour. And I know there are decent Conservative councillors among them who recognise that there is a national crisis in local government finances, as has been set out by councillors across the chamber. And you only have to look at councils like Thurrock or Northamptonshire or Hampshire or Croydon or Kent to know that there are Tory councils and Lib Dem councils and independent councils and Labour councils that have all been pushed to the brink financially after a decade of increasing demand and decreasing spending power from this Conservative government. And what's their response today? Do they join with everybody else in this room and come together and provide solutions? Do they provide any kind of alternative budget? No. Once again, their response is just to blame Labour. Well, let me tell them, Mr. Mayor, blaming Labour is not enough. Nobody here believes it, including, I think, several of them, but nobody out there believes it either. Because blaming Labour isn't going to cut it after 14 years of Conservative government. 14 years. And what have they got to show for it? An economy in chaos, an NHS on its knees, school class sizes through the roof, the classroom roof caving in, taxes, the highest in 7 decades, growth on the floor, trains broken, buses cut, public investment down, crime up, defence weakened, housing depleted, wages stagnant, trust broken. That's their record after 14 years of government, Mr. Mayor. They want to say that it's Labour who's responsible. Well, that's exactly what we will be after the next general election. Thank you.
Councillor Philip Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This budget will be looked at not just by residents of Cleveland and our borough, but it will be looked at by officials in Whitehall, and it will misrepresent our true position. We all need to be understanding, if we're not already privy to. The majority of our income comes from central government. So whatever we're talking about today in terms of council tax is paltry in comparison to central government support. So what we need is a budget that actually tells the truth. Now, our 151 officer has done the best that he could given the political pressures that no doubt exist in preparing a budget. But I'm just going to read some of the narrative that looks at one of the key elements in the budget, in the medium-term financial plan, and they refer to our reserves. So on page 58, 8.2, the extent of the cost pressures needing to be provided in this medium-term financial strategy are significant, and left unmitigated would exhaust the Council's reserves, leaving an unsustainable financial position. Funding levels still fall well short of addressing the pressures. It is extremely important for this Council to recognise the low level of reserves it holds. Reserves will need to be used to fund the level of overspend against the 23-24 budget, and to facilitate the delivery of elements of the 24-25 savings programme. There remains a significant level of uncertainty and risk regarding the assumptions underpinning the MTFS, particularly within demand-led statutory services. The Council's financial position has been extremely challenging over the last 2 years, which has seen a significant depletion of reserve levels held. So what are the details? Simply, we only have circa £7 million of reserves which will be available to provide a degree of financial resilience against the MTFS position from 24-25. 7 million. So what is the forecast net revenue? 11.25 million. We are already forecasting a deficit. So today's budget does not address that. We are not building reserves, we are depleting them on plan. We have not made provision, Mr. Mayor, for many costs that we will have to incur. Where's the £300,000 spend for our next local plan provision? Where is the £250,000 spend that is committed to Saltburn chalets? Where is the £2 million spend that is required to bring Saltburn Valley Gardens off the at-risk register? And where are we in terms of identifying these to central government?
Can you start concluding, please?
So, Mr. Mayor, we need to have a budget that spells out the reality of where we are, and not to disguise, consciously or unconsciously, our financial position.
Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start by saying that I can't, in good conscience, vote for the budget put before us today, but I recognise that the Council has financial challenges and it does have to make tough decisions. We've had a pandemic, had a war in Ukraine, and of course, a legacy of decades of financial mismanagement at a local level. It's true, it's true. You know, it's true. Sorry? I'll concede that whilst we've never had a government in my lifetime that's had more of a focus on the Tees Valley, that's invested more in the Tees Valley, it will take time for this to be reflected in an increase in business rates. Obviously, economic revitalisation won't happen overnight. Tees Works and business rates has already been mentioned, and I know it doesn't address the issues today. This is, you know, for the future, but it's been mentioned. So, if you know, let's look at the facts set out in the independent investigation. The taxpayer has invested £560 million. That's a huge sum of money, but we get around 250 million of this back, give or take, as if it has been borrowed from organisations like the UK Infrastructure Bank. We can expect to get at least 1.3 billion from business rates, and that's with 17% of the site occupied by contract. A further 40% of the site is at heads of terms,
we can expect that to bring in an additional 1.4 billion in business rates. These are huge sums of money. With 57% of the sites either under contract or heads of terms, we're talking about 2.8 billion in business rates. Now, obviously, that doesn't all come to this authority. 50% of that will come and fill this council's coffers. And this is over a period of decades. There's still 43% of the site left to be occupied, so who knows how much we're set to receive on top of the figures I've just outlined. The reason I bring this up as well, obviously it's been raised already, but a Lib Dem councillor last week said the mayor had squandered taxpayers' money. 500 million is a huge sum of money, there's no doubt, but as I've outlined, we're going to get half of this back, the taxpayer in general, because it's being loaned, and the site costs £20 million a year to maintain, so if you leave it for 10 years, you're already talking 200 million, so at least we've invested money, and the site's now going to have an outcome and hopefully support this council's finances in the future. But we'll get back to the budget because I appreciate, you know, this is a...
Sorry, Councillor Leroy, can you keep quiet, please?
Yeah. Thank you, thank you. At the end of the day, we're here to represent the views of our ward residents, and it's been made very clear to me by residents in Normandy that they deem charges like the new green waste charge to be completely unacceptable. Obviously, this charge was implemented by the Cabinet. It didn't come to this chamber for a vote, and therefore I can't demonstrate to my residents the opposition unless I vote against today's budget. I know that elected Labour members will be asking in their heads how we'd raise money if we were in their position. Obviously, procurement has been outlined, and I've got to say I was somewhat disappointed with references to Bob the Builder and stuff. I think procurement is a really serious issue. We're not just talking about £7 grand in Eston. We're talking about thousands of these agreements being made across the whole borough. And if you're making... Yes? Okay. Councillor Brown, with due respect, Mr Mayor,
Okay.
I'm just trying to...
Can you keep...
Today, and I'd like to hear what the councillor's got to say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do. So yeah, you know, can you imagine the savings we can make across the board if every delegated decision was scrutinised properly? Whilst I won't be voting for today's budget, I do wish to say a sincere thank you to the officers across the council. I know I've worked incredibly hard for many hours, days and weeks to configure the savings they have. And also credit to some of the Labour members who've spoken today, who've spoken eloquently and have outlined their position well. And, you know, you do deserve credit for that. I'm, you know, sorry that today I won't be voting with you. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Billithers.
Okay. Well, nobody agrees with putting council tax up, do they? Nobody agrees with putting it up to the maximum, as we're having to do here. Nobody agrees with reducing services that are illustrated in this budget. But if you're not in favour, or if you plan to abstain for that matter, what's your alternative? What are you suggesting? What do you think we should do? It's just disingenuous to just vote against or to abstain without suggesting an alternative. And of course we're in this position due to Tory austerity. It's a fancy word, isn't it? I call it cuts, really. Cuts that have fallen disproportionately on local authorities, and in particular, especially local authorities like our own here. In 2010, the rate support grant accounted for about half of the revenue budget. In the following decade, due to these austerity cuts, it was reduced to almost zero. So we saw council tax going up significantly, but the budget was cut, and that has consequences. Half the staff gone. Real job cuts, real cuts in services, real people's lives, and all the knock-on effects for our communities. So we've got a choice today to support this proposal or suggest an alternative, or I suppose face sequestration. We've got to make that choice, and I've not heard any alternatives. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Councillor Steve Kay.
There you are, Steve, you're on.
Kay, did you say?
Yes.
Right, excuse me if I'm a bit lopsided, Mr. Mayor. I've had an operation on my foot, so I won't be standing here for 5 minutes. I think there's a bit of naivety going on amongst the major parties here. The Conservatives seem to have the view that everybody should get together and work together. You know, it's a parish council sort of mentality. But in senior government, you don't work together. Somebody gets a majority, they become the controlling faction, and your job is to oppose them. And you can't expect them to be wiping your backsides all the time either. You know, you've got to really get stuck in. Now, I'm surprised a bit about Councillor Myers, because this unreality exists on both sides. He thinks he shouldn't even be attacked, or Labour shouldn't even be attacked. Wait till you get in next year. The Conservatives will be pulling you to pieces because you'll make such a mess of it all. To get round to the budget, I agree with those people who've said that we've got to make basically we've got to make the best of a bad job, and to abstain is really a get out, and everybody should vote, in my opinion, in a solid fashion, yea or nay. And I do fear that if this budget doesn't go through, what we'll be left with is something far worse. So just think that. Best of a bad job in very difficult circumstances, and vote accordingly.
Councillor David Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me if I got some figures wrong. It is my first budget, so I do apologise if they are. Just more of an observation, really, I suppose, for Chris, is I think people don't mind spending money if they can afford it or see the value for money in it. I think when we sat in here in May, there was figures banded about being £7.9 million into debt. That changed to £3.9 million. Chris, you said today that we were currently 2.2 million with the government funding of 1.5. That leaves 1.7 in debt. Yeah, that's correct. So so it's going in the right direction from May. Yeah, we're going in. Yeah, still overspending. So again, might get these figures wrong, but if we're currently 0.7 in debt currently with the 1.5. Even by bringing the green tax bin at 66,000 homes in the borough, that would if 50,000 homes signed up, that's £2 million. So now when we look at that in the green, then if we can look at sort of things like the procurement and cut down on, as you say, your Bobby builders, etc., etc. There was, you know, there were just two jobs that we sought. You know, that's £30,000. That's, I think, something like 3 lollipop people. All right. So again, like for me, I'm just looking at the figures, and if we're providing the borough with increases of 5%, if people can see the value for money in it, we're doing a lot of cutbacks, but we're not getting anything extra. But also the green tax bin of 40 quid is going to gain 2 million. That's going to put us in the green. So again, apologies if the figures are wrong. I haven't looked right into it, but it's something to look at.
Stephen Martin.
Again, this is my first budget, so I do apologise if I'm a bit rusty. Obviously, it looks like Mr. Alec Brown doesn't like Bob the Builder. But I can't like Bob the Builder. If Bob the Builder is a reputable company, and if Bob the Builder has got all his certificates, and Bob the Builder has got references, why can't we use Bob the Builder to save us money? Yes, you just said then, Bob the Builder may not be on the recruitment list, but we should be making it easier for contractors within Redcar and Cleveland to get on these lists to save us money. These contractors will employ people in Redcar and Cleveland. These contractors will spend money in Redcar and Cleveland. The money is going round in a circle. Then we're not getting contractors from Newcastle, Sunderland, Durham, etc., etc., and spending our hard-earned money out of our region. you're saying it's only 7,000. Well, that's only £7,000, which the council doesn't have. That's only £7,000, which isn't our money. It's a council pays money. It's a taxpayer's money. So every penny which comes into this council, we should be scrutinising to make sure it's spent correctly. And that's all I've got to say.
Right, this has been a good debate, and as they conclude with Councillor Gray for the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Loftus, a town in East Cleveland where RCB seem to fear to tread, but only under extreme circumstance. I've got a list of stuff here, and at the risk of turning it to Neville Chamberlain, I'm just going to roughly, I'll be as quick as possible, which will be very quick. Drains, enforcement, bins, fences, everything in East Cleveland. The threat of the 114 notice, special measures, it feels like for the last 6 months that Loftus is already in special measures. So it's very worrying that we're getting that threat that it could get worse in Loftus. I'm not an abstainer, and I feel abstaining is a cop-out of responsibilities. The final straw, and I'm sorry, Councillor Brown, but obviously over the last couple of days the MFC carry on, and I really thank you for the work you've put into that, and hopefully come to.
It's John Baker and myself have come to an agreement. We're perfectly fine, as explained to you before the meeting.
And I do thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
I do thank you for that, and I thank you for the work.
It was an over-exuberant board member that sent an email out, but yeah, for the hysteria was caused. Everything's under control, and we're getting under the table.
Really, as the conversation we had yesterday, it shouldn't have got to that. It shouldn't have got to that level. So it's really regret and much soul searching that I cannot support the budget. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Massey in to conclude, I'd just like to say it's going to be a difficult and hard decision. I, for one, represent my residents, but also, being mayor, I represent the borough, and I will be making one of those hard decisions as well. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to members for their comments. I've written down everything that I can. I agree with Councillor Salvin that we should work together and that work should continue, and I'm always happy to have a conversation with yourself, Paul, and your team. Some of the items that were raised I think by a number of members. So this budget exists with so to answer Councillor Taylor's point from a bit later on, there is a £0.7 million shortfall in this budget, but the only way that we've got to £0.7 million is because of the fact that we are putting the council tax up 4.99%. We're cutting 7.57 million from council services this year. All of that added together still leaves minus 0.7 at the bottom of the ledger. So that's the real challenge that we've got. I think a few members mentioned procurement. Councillor Salvin was the first. I have no issue with looking at that further. Councillor Martin mentioned it, and Councillor Martin Taylor done great work with the 2 items that were identified. But it's not a reason not to vote for this budget today. It's a reason to work together tomorrow. It's not a reason not to vote for this today. Councillor Hart mentioned the council, or this council, can't manage their money. We've had from Councillor Davis, Councillor Brown. 1 in 10 councils in this country have said they will go bust in the next financial year. 5 in 10 councils in this country have said they will go bust in the next parliament. This is not a problem exclusive to Redcar. Redcar is ahead of the curve in these. It's in a bad situation. It's not as bad as the 8 bankrupt councils, the special measure councils. The way we avoid going into those steps is by passing this budget today. Councillor Nightingale mentioned this is an indicative budget. He's incredibly correct in that. These are the best estimates that we have today. This is what our Section 151 officer needs. But the work begins tomorrow. So the £7.57 million worth of cuts. Those reports will come to Cabinet on the bigger items so that we will make individual decisions. But ultimately, we need to find £7.57 million from somewhere. These are the suggestions we have today. That's what we're asking for approval for today. Councillor Leroy mentioned austerity. He's incredibly correct. Tristan and myself got elected at the same time together in 2011, and this place, as he said, looks very different. Indeed, we were in Eston at first. It looks very different than it did in 2011. There are fewer staff, about 1,000 fewer. There's far less money. Councillor Suthers mentioned the huge cuts to revenue support grant, and they almost demand from government that we raise revenue locally from council taxpayers. In that way, Councillor Hanaway is very correct that we cannot go on as we are. What happens if this budget fails? He outlined quite clearly. We will be back here effectively in a week or so, but we'll be back here in a week £2.3 million worse off, and we'd have to make further cuts. 7.57 million goes up immediately if we come back next week. Councillor Hart mentioned about implementation ahead, and I agree that he, in his role as Chair of Scrutiny, Councillor Nightingale and the other scrutiny chairs have a role to play here to ensure that councillors are fully informed and fully aware of those cuts, where they're going to fall, what the impact's going to be. Councillor Davies, helpfully, I know he's done work for the LGA himself, has cited some of the LGA stats, which I've already mentioned. He mentioned Tees works potentially being an opportunity, but also potentially a risk. Just for reference, there is no money from Tees works in the budget for this year. It may go up to 1.5 million next year, may go to $1 million thereafter. The problem that we've got, obviously councillors are concerned about some of the items. No one wants to make any cuts. But if we don't do green waste, we need to find fees and charges in this budget has £960,000 next to its name. If we don't do the CDO change, £230,000 in this budget is next to its name. We would have to make another difficult decision. The difficult decisions in front of us today are the ones that we're talking about now. Councillor Brown and Quartermain suggested that there are no alternatives being presented by the opposition and that other councils are in the same position. Councillor Hunt and I think a few others, Councillor Gray to an extent and Councillor Pugh to an extent, all mentioned feedback potentially from their residents, which I appreciate, and I thought all spoke very respectfully, and I appreciate that. Without giving you a history lesson, Edmund Burke, who is regarded as the father of modern day conservatism, he was a politician in the 18th century, said that politicians are not elected to take delegations and mandates from their electorate. They're elected to use their intelligence, because politicians have the full picture, and often our residents, through no fault of their own, because it's not their job, don't understand everything that goes on. They see a council tax rise, but don't understand, as Councillor Hunt said, the 403 children in our care that potentially requires it. So I plead to those councillors to look at the whole picture. Councillor Thompson said that this budget misrepresents the position of the council. I don't believe that it does. He himself cited the fact that the reserves of this council have effectively halved in the last 2 years. He cited some of the very issues, the very clear position this council has, that we have spent 20 million of reserves
Councillor
already.
Massey, can you conclude, please?
Ooh, I can. I'm trying to get to everybody. I think the budget does not misrepresent the position. Councillor Suthers asked what's the alternative. Councillor Kay, I hope your foot's feeling better. Councillor Taylor, I've already talked about. Councillor Martin, congratulations on your maiden speech. I think it was a fair point. Procurement could definitely be something we pick up, but it's not a reason not to vote for this today. And Councillor Gray I've already covered. But I do think that this is a difficult decision. I appreciate that we get pressure from residents, pressure from our parties, pressure from other councillors. But this is what's in front of us today. Do the right thing today. We'll work together tomorrow, as I hope that we have over the last year, and certainly I know I have with some members. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'd like now to turn it to the Managing Director to take the vote.
Thank you, members. I'll run through the list in alphabetical order. I'm looking for one of three answers. I'm looking for either for the budget, against the budget, or to abstain. If I miss you out, I will come back to you if you popped out the chamber. But starting first with Councillor Atwood, Councillor Belshaw, Councillor Berry, Councillor Brooke, Councillor Brown, Councillor Corley, Councillor Cheney, Councillor Clark B, Councillor Craven, Councillor Cutler, Councillor Davies, Councillor Earl, Councillor Evans, Councillor Fairley, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Gray, Councillor Grogan, Councillor Hanaway, Councillor Hargreaves, Councillor Hart I, Councillor Hart J, Councillor Head, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Jones, Councillor Joy, Councillor Kay, Councillor King, Councillor Lavin, Councillor Leroyd, Councillor Martin, Councillor Massey, Councillor McHugh, Councillor McInnes, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Meyer, Councillor Nightingale, Councillor O'Donoghue, Councillor Ovens, Councillor Pallister, Councillor Powley, Councillor Pugh, Councillor Quatermain, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Ryder, Councillor Rinn, Councillor Salvin, Councillor Smith, Councillor Suthers, Councillor Simon, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Thompson J, Councillor Thompson P, Councillor White, Yep.
Okay, the voting was as follows: 37 for, 16 against, and 1 abstain. So I do say the budget was passed.
Who will reserve his right to speak? So the next item, hopefully a bit less contentious, is the pay policy statement. It is a requirement, a legal requirement, to publish this annually. It speaks about the pay of our senior officers, our lower paid staff, and the relationship between the pay, between our lowest and highest paid. It's previously been through Cabinet, but it requires full council approval. The real positive headline, I think, of this report is this report approves the council's minimum wage supplement, which is a level higher than the national living wage, which is 11.44. Our living wage supplement, which meets the foundation for the living wages number, is £12 an hour. So it means that the employees of this council are paid a real living wage, which is very positive. The report also notes the position of the pay multiple, which is 4.96, the relationship between high paid and low paid staff. It reports on the gender pay gap, which interestingly at this authority has a positive representation for women, 9.7% higher women's pay is to men's, and 2.2% if we use the mean calculation. The full statement is contained within the appendices if members are so inclined to read it, as I have, and details the levels of remuneration for our chief officers, the severance packages in our systems that exist if that is applicable, and our gender pay gap, which I've already discussed, but hopefully non-controversial. I move the report.
Yeah, you're seconding. You're saying anything? Can I propose that we accept that report, please? Seconded. Hands up for vote, please. That's been accepted. the next debate is the members' allowance scheme. Councillor Massey again. Councillor Brown, you were seconding?
Yes. Councillor Brown will second and reserve the right to speak. So this report is always an awkward report for members, and I think there has been a long-standing precedent in this chamber when Labour have been in control, when there's been an independent or Liberal coalition in control, that effectively it seems ridiculous that councils are technically, councillors, able to set their own pay. So the precedent that has been set previously is that the independent remuneration panel, which meets and considers the reports, when they say pay goes up, it goes up. If they say it stays the same, it stays the same. And if they say it goes down, it goes down. Although we formally, legally have to make this decision, this precedent has allowed us to effectively take this slightly out of our own hands and put it to the panel. So the panel have recommended to us this year, this is the panel's report, that the threshold for a size of a group leader should change. So if somebody who is a group leader, they have to have a minimum of 10 members within their group, which is up from the current of 5. They also suggest that the leader of the ruling group, so in this example it would be Councillor Brown, cannot claim both a leader's allowance and a leader of a group's allowance because he is the council leader and the leader of a group. He is the leader of the Labour group. Technically, he could claim 2 allowances. This makes it very clear in writing that he could not in the future. It's not, Councillor Brown has never done this, just for clarity. Sorry. But it's just for an example there. And also, the number of group leaders' allowances should be limited to 3 with the addition of a council leader's allowance. So it's very minor change, but this is what they got from feedback from members. This is their conclusion. There are no other changes to the scheme that have been agreed this year. They have basically took on things that they looked at last time. So all other elements of the scheme remain unchanged, which includes the provision that any councillor pay award is directly linked to staff's pay award. So if the staff pay goes up, councillors' pay goes up. If they don't go up, they don't go up. So the best way I can say is that we try and take this decision out of our hands and say whatever the panel prints, we accept. Members, though, have a free vote today and are able to decide differently to that, but my side will be suggesting that we take the report from the panel as written. Thank you.
Does a member wish to speak? All right. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo what Councillor Massey was saying, I think I say this every year, it's completely inappropriate for us to be voting on our own pay. And I urge the Mayor or the monitoring officer to change the constitution and just don't bring this every year if we can and make it a decision by the IRIP. Just think it's completely inappropriate that we vote on our own pay.
Councillor Nightingale.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think the speech that Councillor Massey's made is probably the same as mine last year, and it's the same as his last year that I probably will be doing now. In fact, probably there's a slight difference. It was the Liberal Democrats, in fact, who introduced initially or enunciated the principle that the members of the council should not set their own pay. And that has been established now, and I'm very glad that it has. For quite a number of years now. So I'm not going to speak about any of the details. I just think we should accept what has gone on. And I think it's quite right. A couple of years ago, we introduced the principle that it should be linked to councillors' pay. Allowances should be linked to the pay of the staff and increases. And that in addition, is an important prerequisite for deciding what the councillors' pay should be. We have an independent remuneration panel, and I think it's important that we accept their independence and accept their decision.
Councillor Philip Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have tabled an amendment, and I think every member has a copy of the amendment. So I'd just like, in introducing the amendment, Mr. Mayor, to advise that this is a matter that I've raised for over 1.5 years at scrutiny and at full council, and until today it has not been actioned. So the wording of my amendment, which has a seconder, is, given that the review process conducted by the independent review panel supports the principles of, quote, managing public money well and, quote, keeping the council financially stable and, quote, allows the council to be transparent and invites, quote, members' own proposals. So the order paper invites, subject, of course, to reasonableness. So therefore, it is proposed that the independent review panel recommendations be amended to include that all elected members granted a parking permit should be expected to pay the appropriate cost of the permit. And I think given the discussions that we've been having about lack of positive suggestions for saving expenditure and looking at legitimate income, I would ask that the council members duly support the amendment.
On that amendment, oh, sorry. Sorry, Callie.
Actually, the cabinet member, Councillor Massey, I believe this is already, it's already been agreed. So sorry, I'm. All right, okay. I'll let Councillor Massey deal with it. All right, okay.
Can you sum up the amendment, please?
Yes. So I empathise with where Philip's coming from here, but I don't think that the Independent Remuneration Panel report does not say anywhere within it that councillors get free parking, so I don't believe this amendment is needed. In fact, the Independent Remuneration Panel's report says that councillors can purchase a permit using salary sacrifice if they wish, which for older members will remember this is what we used to do in the past. I think what we have tried to do, certainly in the cabinet reports previously and the budget setting exercises we had, is to make it so if staff pay, councillors pay. So I agree with Councillor Thompson's sentiment completely, but my view is the amendment is not needed. This is something that we were looking to bring in anyway, and is something that we don't need the report to bring in. We can bring it in separately. But you have my assurance here, Philip, that I fully agree with the sentiment of the amendment, and we would like to see if staff have to pay to park out there, we should have to pay to park out there, would be my very firm view. So I would ask, it's entirely up to Philip, but I would ask him to withdraw the amendment. If he does not, I would ask members to vote against it in light of what I've just said.
Councillor Philip Thompson, do you have any?
We're now advised, late the 11th hour, that this has already been discussed. It's already been agreed and will be being introduced. It would have been very, very helpful, Mr. Mayor, if, as a lay elected member, I had been privy to that decision.
Do you wish to withdraw that amendment or carry on with it?
On the basis that I have been advised that it is now going to be council policy to introduce such a measure, and had been given that assurance today in front of full council, it seems incumbent upon me to be reasonable, as I've asked council to be reasonable, to have simply that my amendment be recorded in the minutes as being proposed, that it has been agreed outside of the council that it will be implemented, and on that basis I am happy to stand down.
We all sort of waved our hands to say that we agree with the sentiment of that, because I think it is important that the public know that we go along with what Councillor Thompson said. I must admit, it's an absolute surprise to find that I wasn't paying. I didn't even know until I was told by my boss. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. We have accepted Philip Thompson's amendment. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Can we vote on that report, please? So the fourth report, Councillor Struthers.
Right. Yeah, this is a report on corporate parenting that comes to council every 2 months. And we've had a long budget debate, so I'll be fairly quick with this, you'll be pleased to hear. And I'll go into a lot more detail about this another time. It's the first time I've delivered this report. Given the budget debate earlier, I was a bit worried it might be my last. Fortunately, I'll be able to take that lettuce out of the fridge and dispose of it later. Corporate parenting, it's one of our most important duties, isn't it? Looking after the most vulnerable in our community. The report says 403. I've been informed it's reduced to 397 over the last week or so. Children in our care. It's a lot, isn't it? About 400. And in addition to that, there are other children who we're monitoring that are at risk or vulnerable. It's a big ticket item in the budget. It's a big ticket item. Complex cases, child in our care can cost up to £1 million a year. And, you know, that could last for 10 or 12 years. So it's a big issue that we've got to be very much concerned with. And as I say, I'll go into it in more detail at a future time when there's a bit, you know, we've not used up quite so much time on the previous reports. But what we've got to really do is address the causes. You know, there's a massive amount of poverty in our community. And the trouble is we haven't got much money, as we said earlier. It's like catch-22, isn't it? We haven't got the money, really, to address the causes. But we're starting to do some of that. There are a couple of schemes, Best Start in Life, Thrive at 5, and things like that, which we'll be looking at, and I'll go into more detail on in due course. In the report, it talks about foster carers. Now, you've been talking about, Bob the Builder seems to be the theme, so I thought I might mention him here. It's not Bob the Builder, it's Bob the foster carer, really. That's where we'd save the big money, isn't it? It's much, much cheaper if we can get foster carers in the borough to engage, and we need more of them as we've got more children in care. That's the key thing. We've got to engage with them, encourage them, support them, and some aspects of that are in the report. Then there's a section on care leavers. You know, it's important that we facilitate children leaving care when they get to 17, 18, 19 and so on. And there are some successes in this report about that. There's a quick picture of one of our care leavers who was Champion of the Year. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it means you meet Princess Anne, so it must be important. And then there's a section on virtual school, which provides personal education plans for all the children in care, and that's really doing well. In fact, 100% have got PEPs, as we call them, you know, now that I'm getting used to it. It's really doing well. One thing that is of a concern, I think, for all of us, you know, we're all corporate parents, aren't we? One thing that really is a concern is the exploitation, and there's a section on that in the report which you've either read or to read later. You know, we're looking at children who are particularly vulnerable here. They're vulnerable to be exploited in a criminal way, or to be involved in the drug trade and things, or for sexual exploitation, of course. We read about that from time to time, don't we, up and down the country. You know, we've got to look after these children that are in these vulnerable positions. It's a really important part of our role as councillors, isn't it? And there's a worry that there's an increasing amount of crime in our you know, more crime gangs around in our authority. Somebody telling me the other day, the weapon of choice for these crime gangs now is a machete in our area. You know, that is scary, isn't it? And so we've got to be concerned about this. We have a small home for 5 young people, no wrong door. And maybe we should be opening more homes in the future in consultation and collaboration with nearby authorities to do that. That would save us money, of course, as well. Although, you know, there are many noteworthy problems with children's homes that you may have read in the press. But these are some of the things we need to be addressing to try and improve our current position and make the position the better in future. For social reasons, but also because it is the big ticket item in the budget. So I hope you'll read the report. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. Thanks very much.
Right, so of the members now. Craig Hanaway. Sorry, you come up on the green one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and congratulations on your first report, Councillor Suthers. In a previous children's scrutiny, a recent one, we were told that whereas we didn't used to have any criminal gangs that exploit children based in this borough, of course we had them crossing over from other boroughs, but apparently we've now got 3 of them. So I just wanted to ask if you can give us any update on what's happening there. And also, are you yourself going to go on a fostering or adoption panel? Because I would really recommend it in terms of finding out about you know, what happens to these children and what's done about it.
Any further speakers? No. Right. I guess does this sum up?
Down here, so I'm trying to remember. I haven't got any more details about the criminal gangs, but you're quite right that we've got more criminal gangs coming into our community. That's scary, isn't it? You know, that means we've got to be extra vigilant for looking after our children that are you know, targets for these people. I don't have any more details on it. I could ask if we can provide any more details and write, and I'm sure that Catherine's making a note now that we'll write to you about that. Of course, there's a limited amount we can say about that because it's to do with criminal activity and things. So even if I knew, I'd be a little bit sceptical about saying a great deal. And yes, I believe so. As far as the panel's concerned.
Report to 5 minutes comfort break. Right, can we return to our seats, please? Right, can we start the meeting again, please? It starts with item 9, which is a cabinet report from Lisa Belshaw.
Hello. As this is my annual report, and I've only actually been 9 months in my first year as cabinet role for adults, I'd like to give a big thank you out to Councillor Mary Ovens. For those that don't know, Mary was the cabinet lead for adults for the previous 4 years, and officers speak highly of her dedication and support for adults, so thank you, Mary. Mary is involved in many of the things that are actually mentioned in my report today, and I'm so pleased that Mary is now chair of the Adults Wellbeing and Health Scrutiny Committee, as it means that we can continue to benefit from her experience and her enthusiasm. Personally, I've worked for many years as an occupational therapist in both health and social services, so I fully understand both the strengths as well as the challenges within these sectors. Now, as a newly elected councillor and cabinet member, I've been given the opportunity to try and shape and improve a sector that I'm absolutely passionate about. I can promise everyone in this chamber that I am fully committed to doing this. The sector has a chronic shortage of funding, which does result in low-paid, undervalued workforce and a struggle to recruit. I know from first-hand experience that care staff are neither paid nor valued in the way that they deserve. I've heard of support staff being referred to as unskilled staff just because some don't have a university education. This frustrates and angers me. In my area of work, I could give so many examples where care staff have skillfully and compassionately supported distressed, frightened, and vulnerable individuals. I've witnessed the same level of skill and compassion in services that I've visited in our borough since I was elected. I remember one visit to one of our Learning Disability Day services in Redcar. An individual who attended was becoming very agitated and upset, and the care worker sensitively, calmly, and skillfully reassured them using sign language. I challenge anyone to try and tell me that that is unskilled work. Change needs to happen so that staff that work in social care have parity with colleagues in the NHS regarding pay and the way that they are valued. Unfortunately, much of this is beyond our control within local government. However, I will continue to campaign for changes at a national level and continue to do whatever I can at local level. There are things that can be done at local level. There are some in this chamber that might remember Councillor Dave Walsh, an ex-cabinet member for adults who sadly died in 2022. Dave was a larger-than-life character that was passionate about social care. It was Dave that pushed for the change that required all our commissioned care at home companies to pay staff, regardless of their age, the over 23-year-old national living wage as part of our contractual obligations. Although we need to look to central government to fundamentally change career structure and pay within social care, Councillor Walsh and then Councillor Ovens afterwards showed us that there are things that can be done at local level. I am and will continue to work hard to do the same. One of our new initiatives that we hope will increase availability of paid carers within our borough is something called the Care in Kind. This is a joint venture with Anglo-American and other partners, and it aims to raise the profile of those that work in social care. It was only launched a few months ago, so it's still early days, but we'll report back to scrutiny on its progress. We've made progress in other areas since May. Non-urgent occupational therapy waiting lists ran into months when I first started, but now it's reduced to almost zero. We've had some positive results from the 2022-23 Adult Social Care National Survey. Out of 152 councils, we had the 6th highest satisfaction rate, and we were 12th highest when adults were asked if services made them feel safe and secure. The survey did identify we had a higher rate than the national average on permanent residential admissions. We are addressing this by continuing to promote recovery and independence and by setting a target of more adults accessing our reablement services. I've been incredibly impressed with the partnership work that happens across our borough. South Tees Health and Wellbeing Board is a perfect example of this, where local planning takes place between 5 key partners. These partners are our council, Middlesbrough Council, the Integrated Care Board, South Tees NHS Foundation Trust, and Tees and Esk and Weir Valley NHS Trust. Over this last year, a lot of work has been carried out between the council and other partners to support more timely hospital discharge. Nationally, and this shocked me, this number, there are around 12,000 adults in hospital beds at any one time who actually no longer require hospital treatment. Them remaining in a hospital is putting them at risk of hospital-acquired infections and muscle loss, and also it's reducing availability of beds for those that actually need hospital treatment. Within our borough, with our partners, we're addressing this by applying what's called the discharge assess model. We know that patients recover better in their own home environment, providing they're given the right support on discharge. My report, as you'll see, details the 4 pathways, explaining that the aim is that actually only 1% of patients should be going into long-term care straight from hospital. Another target we hope to achieve by applying this model is to reduce the number of patients delayed in hospital by 42% within the year. On a personal level, I've seen this model work incredibly well in practice, where my dad was recently admitted to James Cook very poorly over Christmas, but before Christmas. With a diagnosis of sepsis and COVID, he was certainly in the correct place at the beginning, but towards the end I could see a deterioration in his mood and his orientation. He needed to be home. Coordinated occupational therapy, physiotherapy, dietitian and district nurse input got him home 3 days before Christmas, where he's thankfully getting better with the correct community support. Another exciting development in our borough is the integrated single point of access at Daisy Lane, based in North Ormsby. Here, a team of integrated professionals from across health and social care are located. It's almost like a one-stop shop where other health and social care professionals can refer patients to, and where they can be signposted and directed towards the correct service. And the fact it's all in one place helps to do that. Up until now, Daisy Lane's main focus has been on supporting hospital discharge, but this is going to be extended to avoid admission as well. Our council has recently been awarded over £1 million by the Levelling Up programme, which is brilliant, and that will allow us to expand this team. And this space, it's going to be expanded as a site, expanded as a team, and it's now going to include the community mental health services as well, which is brilliant. I'd like to give a special thanks to all our unpaid carers in our borough. All carers are entitled to a separate carers assessment. And I was pleased to say in Q3 we're seeing an increase in carers receiving this assessment, but we need to do more to continue and improve on this by encouraging and supporting unpaid carers to seek out this assessment and seek out support. We are constrained by what we can receive from central government, but we need to do a lot more with lot better with what we do for carers as well. And one of my promises in this chamber as cabinet member is to do a full evaluation of what we currently offer carers, because they really do need our support. Another of my promises on taking up my role was to ensure that our borough was doing enough for our neurodiverse population. The Care Act that was revised in 2022 recognises that social care aren't doing enough, and autism is mentioned in this update especially, and it gives us really, really clear guidance as local authorities what we need to be doing. So on taking up in my role, I requested that an independent consultation was carried out, seeking views from autistic adults, their carers and professionals to work out what we need to sort of do better, and that report is getting pulled together, and I'll be presenting that as soon as we get that. I'd like to thank all members that are part of the Adults Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. Please keep challenging and asking questions, as that's the only way that we're going to improve our services. And thank you to all members that have undertook rota visits to care homes in our borough. But can I encourage more members to do the same? As I said, we're aiming to try and reduce the amount of people going into residential homes, but when people do go in there, we need them to be places that you or I would be 100% confident that our loved ones, or even us ourselves, will be happy to be in. And we need your eyes and ears in order to help us do that. And finally, as I mentioned at the start, I'm a new councillor and cabinet member, and this 9 months has certainly been a whirlwind with so much to learn and see. I've been incredibly impressed with the commitment, compassion and enthusiasm of the staff that work in our adult social care team. We've recently had an external peer review, and our staff were mentioned particularly within that. The team highlighted how lucky we were to have such a committed workforce. I agree and would like to publicly thank and pay tribute to them in here today. I'll continue to work hard to support and improve our services, both for the adults that use them, the carers that support them, and our brilliant workforce that provide them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that very good report. I'll now open it to members to ask questions. The first is Mary Huns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Belshaw, I congratulate her on getting to grips with her portfolio as quickly as she had, and thank her for her kind words. It's very different being on the scrutiny side of things, because we want to be helpful, but we're also going to have to be tough, because we know, we've heard from the budget things, that times are very tough. I think the report is concise and informative, and I thank you for that. It reflects the extent of the work of adult services. Sadly, it also reflects problems facing adult services, such as domiciliary care, the fees and pay for care workers, which has been with us for many years, affected by COVID, yes, but it's been with us too long, and getting that seamless movement between the health services, health carers, and moving into social care. We have a high percentage of residents with complex
needs. Can I ask you, Councillor, if you've got a question?
Sorry, I have. We have I'll come to it now. We have a significant number of residents with complex needs and health problems, and I think you've referred to that. What is your aim for that service, and where do you think you can improve it? And I'm sorry to land on when you've only been in post 9 months, but I would also like to thank all the staff and carers, everyone else who does their very damnedest, I think, to take care of our most vulnerable residents. And I wish her well with the work ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Belshaw.
Can't do that in isolation. I think there are discussions sort of happening at the South Tees board that you're part of, and there is a stream that are looking at that kind of group. So I haven't got the answers as to how yet, only that we know that there's an issue and more needs to be done. But I think as I say, I've been really impressed by that joint working and that recognition that social services can't do it alone, health can't do it alone. We've got to have much, much better working, and I'm reassured to sort of see that's happening. So, and as we start working on those things and there's more objectives of names, I will bring that back to scrutiny.
Councillor Craig Annaway.
For your report, for a very clear and informative report, during which you mentioned the Health and Wellbeing Board, and you sounded quite positive, quite upbeat about them. Now, my memories of the Health and Wellbeing Board was that it was a bit of a talking shop, really. The late Councillor Walsh, who you mentioned, used to complain about the professionalisation of the board. The doctors on the board in particular were not really interested in things like health inequalities. They just thought it was all about lifestyle, and it was hard to, I mean, they'd never kind of wanted to get to grips with, you know, you'd mentioned Marmot, you know, David Marmot's work, and they'd never really heard of that kind of thing. Is it better now?
Councillor Belshaw.
Still early days because it's not a monthly thing, so again, I'm still kind of quite new to that, but yes, it feels like it is. We're asking for sort of targets within that, and they are seeming to sort of set targets. I agree, sometimes those sorts of committees can feel like talking shops. I don't want it to be part of that because I haven't got enough time. It's a busy role, I work as well, and I think we agree, just we don't want to be there just for talking things. We need to have some clear outcomes. And now that they've got the different kind of streams, you know, looking at kind of the elderly, there's a neurodiversity kind of stream as well. That one I need to go back to when this report, because the report I made reference to in my report, the consultation, that's been done across with Middlesbrough as well, and that's going to feed into that group, and we hope that the recommendations from that consultation are going to be taken across both health and social care. So yeah, it is seeming to be better.
Councillor Coley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Lisa, for your report, and I'm pleased to see that you are looking at the neurodiverse team. We all this week, some of us, did the dementia-friendly training, and in there we learn an awful lot. But we mustn't forget that those that are neurodiverse and autistic have a lot of the same issues that those with dementia face, and discrimination no matter what. The question I have for the Cabinet member, I suppose, is we all know it's an issue nationally as well as locally. As a child is leaving school age, there is very little support for that autistic child or young person until they're 25. How are we going to bridge that gap with support? And my other question is, we're striving as a borough to become more dementia friendly. Can we also look at the Autistic Society on making our buildings autistic friendly also? Thank you.
Councillor Belshaw.
Yeah, transitions across from children's to adults is the massive issue anyway. I think we are working on it, but again, we kind of need to do better on that. I know from hearing people on the ground, that's people often feel like they get missed in that gap between that move. So one of the things I was discussing with Patrick Rice in my last kind of briefing was, you know, could we get together kind of with children's more and have those sort of discussions so that we can, and that does happen, but I think we need to kind of get better at that. And there's recognition, I think, from officers about that as well. So yeah, a lot of more work on transitions. Yeah, autism, we're not doing that well enough. I think sometimes we do better for those that are autistic and got a learning disability, but what we don't do is for the individuals that are autistic and on the surface don't appear to have the same needs as those with a learning disability as well. And those individuals just get missed in children's and in adults as well, and often it leads to kind of mental health issues, and we do need to address that. The consultation that we've carried out, and it's Daisy Shane, that are an independent organisation, that have done that for us, so it's totally independent. We've been having meetings about that, so we're getting a few things that are coming through for that consultation, but we haven't got the full report, but they're saying there's some really good stuff kind of coming out. There's probably going to be some stuff that's tough for us to hear about what we're not doing well. There's probably going to be things that come through that as social services we can't do anything. It's health, but again we'll feed that back to our health colleagues. But the good thing is it's simple things as well. Some of the things people are saying, it won't cost, you know, it's things. One bit of feedback was everything's expected to be done over the phone. People want us to have appointments over the phone, and an individual was saying, I can't cope with speaking to people over the phone. I would need to do it by email because that's just, I can't do, and so we need to make adaptations like that, which shouldn't be costly. It's those adjustments that we should be kind of making. And yet definitely on the autism training is something we need to kind of look at. It is getting delivered within our council, but we need to ensure that that's done more widely and that it's actually implemented in practice as well.
Councillor Philip Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your report. I've got 3 questions. One relates to your conclusions, and that is asking for more members to be involved in the rota. So my question in that respect is how many elected members are actually already signed up for that? Now, I think the inspections traditionally have usually been of what we might call traditional care homes, but there are other establishments that offer health and social service security home. Are we inspecting those? Because I do think they tend to fall off the radar in terms of not being immediately recognized as providers. Now, in that particular respect, a lot of residents in that sort of accommodation are not elderly, but a lot of them are challenged by physical disability and mental disability, are actively seeking work but not successful in obtaining it. So what support is the local authority considering offering, and if it is not, what can it do to look to offer in this particular field?
Councillor Belshaw.
Just ask for clarity on the group that you're referring to for your last question there.
Residents who are challenged by disability and physical and mental, who are seeking employment, but appear, certainly in my experience, in some instances to be either outside a system, not captured by it, partly because of their inability to understand how to access the system, but also because the system does not necessarily see it as its responsibility, or is already challenged by overload in providing other services. So it is not exhaustive in its seeking out and supporting where it could do. So without giving you specific examples, hopefully that is sufficient of a question, but I'm very happy to speak with you outside of chamber to follow up on some specifics.
Okay, firstly, the numbers, I don't know. I can't, there was some, but not enough when I spoke to the officers about it, but I will get an exact number of how many officers, how many councillors have done the visits. But last time I spoke, there was some, but there wasn't enough. So I'll get an exact number, but we always need more. The more, the better. I think that when we first sent that email out, there was a flurry, and then it kind of sort of stopped. So we probably need to send something else out, just encouraging people to do that. As far as who gets inspected, it isn't just the care homes. So anyone delivering that kind of direct care, so our care organisations that go in and support people with personal care at home, they'll get inspected as well. So it's wider than just the residential homes. I agree some people are sometimes falling through the gap. Regarding the group that you're referring to, and I'll definitely catch up kind of afterwards to sort of talk about specific cases, because it always kind of helps. But yeah, people are sometimes, and a bit about employment as well. You're right, and actually, you know, Councillor Earl raised this with me as well about somebody that she knows that's got a learning disability and is desperate for employment, but isn't getting the help with that. And that's something I said to Councillor Earl that I'll be looking more into, because that was on one of the things. I refer to some of the indicators, and if I can find it. They're very small, but we aren't as good as I would like to be in the way that we're supporting individuals with learning disabilities into paid employment. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be looking at in one of my briefings, to find out more information about what we are doing and what we could be doing, because I agree those that have got physical disabilities, learning disabilities, still need that meaningful employment and activity. It's important to all of us. If people are feeling like they're falling through a gap, everybody's entitled to an adult care assessment. So if you're meeting anybody in your community that does have some sort of needs, then encourage them to seek out that assessment, because everyone's got the entitled to that assessment. So we need to be doing that as councillors to be supporting that.
The last question I'm taking is from Councillor Leroy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's quite concerning what I read recently with regards to the immigration rules, meaning that carers who come to this country essentially have to incorporate the cost of their training into their wage, which leads to the exploitation of carers. I'm also particularly concerned with regards to the existing social care worker force, where they too can be exploited in an area that particularly we don't want workers to be exploited, because obviously they're caring for our relatives and then for us one day. So just wondering what steps you're taking to identify if any exploitation's going on, and then as an adjunct to that, just in terms of social care cooperatives. Now, this is something that I read about many years ago, and indeed I think I was at a meeting with Councillor Southers at the time. So just to see if there are any progressions in terms of social care cooperatives. So fairness for care workers is the main issue.
I don't know on the social care cooperatives whether that has been discussed. If it has been, it's before my time, but I'll take that back and find out more information about that. I totally agree about sometimes the exploitation of workers that are coming from abroad. You know, there's been terrible things that have kind of happened where care companies are almost holding people to ransom, and you know, we've got to avoid that. We are I don't think there's many of the companies that we use that are working using people from abroad, but we're keeping an eye on that in regards to that not happening. It's certainly something that's been discussed in some of the sort of the briefings. I agree. You know, we need it to be a safe place for people to be working. They can't be exploited. I'm not the cost of trading. I'd not heard. Where was that was happening? Did you? Yeah, yeah. Wouldn't be contracting to anybody. We've got like a fair wage agreement, and that in any contract that we do with anybody, that there's a certain amount that we're saying that needs to go to care workers, and there is regular inspections as well with providers. So if we had any suspicions that was going on with any care company that we commissioned out to, those inspections should pick kind of that up. But I'll take that issue back to ensure that we aren't missing out, because that does creep in a bit more. But yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Knightley, your light went off, but I'll take your question now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Belso, for the question. I want to refer to page 282, paragraph 6.8, which refers to animal-assisted therapy. I'm a regular viewer of Gardener's World, but not necessarily a regular gardener. And Monty Don regularly visits all sorts of gardens, and there he stresses how much gardening is such a valuable asset and helps improve not just general health but mental health as well. So I just wonder whether we actually have gardening assisted therapy at the council, and if we do, whether it's successful, and if we don't, whether she would consider bringing that sort of therapy in, because clearly it's an important way in which people can get And we've got to trust Monty Don that it does actually work. Yeah. Well, they can come and do mine, but I've got someone up there who does a bit more than I do.
Councillor Benshaw.
I don't know if we do or not. Oh. I don't know if we do or not. I can find that out. But I agree. I mean, as an occupational therapist myself, I work in mental health, autism services. I've worked, and I know that sort of activity can be so useful, both, as you say, physical health, mental health, well-being. If we don't do it, we probably should. What I'm quite pleased about, despite all the costs, we're still able to commission some of these preventative stuffs, things kind of going on, and I know we're going to try and do more of a push on the mental health side as well, and agree that sort of thing, you know, just being out in the outdoors, working in the outdoors can be so therapeutic. So I'll find out, because we've got lots of little commission things, so we may well have, but if we haven't, and there's the opportunity to develop something like that, I'd certainly be supporting something like that. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. All right. It now brings to review of proportionality and hand over to Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just the usual technical report in terms of the proportionality calculations even. Unfortunately, there is a small error in the table at paragraph 3.14, and the distribution of seats for the appointments panel should include one ungrouped independent member. So if you look at the table, the last but one row refers to the appointments panel, and the number in there should be a 1, making a total of 7 seats on the committee. But with that caveat, Mr. Mayor, if members would propose second and consider that report, I'd be grateful.
All right. Now, we're coming up to 4:45. We've 3 more items to go on. Can I propose to extend the meeting to 5:30? And a seconder, please. Thank you. Show of hands. No. Carried to 5:30 now. We have one motion by Councillor Salvin, seconded by Councillor Hargreaves. Councillor Salvin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the motion. Mr. Mayor, I love Teesside. A short and sweet statement, but for me, I need to say nothing else. I'm sure most of you in this chamber echo those words. Teesside is where I've lived all my life since the 1980s. I know I don't look that old. And it's where I intend to retire a few decades' time, all being well. I'm sure I can speak for all of us when I say all I want for Teesside is what's best for us. As stated in my budget speech, since May last year, I've listened to the leader of the council bang his drum on how he wants to keep politics out of this political chamber, which I'll be honest, Sally, I've never fully understood, and how he wishes for us all to work together. Well, Alec, today your wishes come true, as this motion is politically neutral, keeps politics out of the chamber, and allows for us all to work together for the benefit of the area. To be frank, it's what the residents of Teesside want to see more often. This economically positive motion that I'm submitting today is a motion of significant consequence for everybody who lives and works on Teesside. It's about local people, local jobs, prosperity and progress. It's also about community and about our future, which I'm sure we'd all agree this area deserves. This British Steel motion is not just about an industrial application, it's about the revitalisation of our entire region, it's about making a solid commitment towards bringing jobs back to Teesside, and it's about reinstating our proud heritage in steel making, a history we can all see behind us on that painting. I want this motion to stand as a call to action, a statement to investors around the world that we share a unification of purpose beyond the usual bounds of political divides. It sends a strong message to the people who voted for us to prove that in the end, we all do truly represent them, and that we're not dominated by the distraction of petty party politics.
It's heartening to note that while the consultation period remains open until March the 3rd, there have been no objections to British Steel's planning application R-2023-0793-ESM. Not one. Natural England has sought some assurances, as you would expect, regarding the potential effect on the environment, but they're happy. They have suggested to add a condition to any planning approval. British Steel are happy with this, so let's be clear, there are no environmental issues with this application. Given this is the case, all we're asking for is that the Council stands up and ensures that this application is heard on the 7th of March. Because the application's timeline is at the utmost importance, much stands on our ability to act in favour of this massive investment right now. The Chair of Regulatory has claimed that he has an obligation to wait until the end of the 16-week determination period. There should be no confusion about this. This is not an obligation at all. The 16-week determination period is a maximum, not a minimum time period for this type of application. There is no legal impediment to considering this application at the upcoming planning meeting on the 7th of March, and yesterday I received written confirmation from the monitoring officer to words of that effect. In his opinion, the legal position is that if this motion succeeds, the decision about the 7th of March would then effectively be down to the Chair due to the legislation for urgent items being dependent on his view. The section of the Act for reference states, by reason of special circumstances, which shall be specified in the minutes, the Chairman of the meeting is of the opinion that the item should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency. In the monitoring officer's opinion, in practical terms, if the motion was supported in its current form and full council agreed, it could go on the meeting for the 7th of March. The only legal way to achieve this would be via the urgency route, which would involve seeking the consent of the Chair, who can then agree or disagree that the item was urgent. Mr. Mayor, can I ask if Steve wants to add anything or clarify that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The position's broadly as Councillor Salvin outlined it, so there is a potential issue with the motion in that normally business can only be considered by a committee if there's 5 clear working days notice of the item to be considered, so that's effectively a week. And that's obviously usually achieved by sending out the agenda in good time before the meeting. In this case, obviously, we've got a position whereby the motion is being considered today, which is in the period between the agenda being sent out and the date of the meeting, so it's not possible to give those 5 clear days notice. We don't use it as a rule, but there is a provision within the Local Government Act 1972 which does allow for urgent business to be considered, but that legislation does specify in basic terms it's only where the chairman of the committee holds the opinion that that's warranted because of exceptional circumstances and urgency. The council motion or resolution can't override that primary legislation, so if the motion was carried in its current format, we would have to go through the urgency procedures, and that would involve consulting the chairman of the committee. That can't be bypassed, because if it was, then the consideration of the application on the meeting would be unlawful and challengeable. Obviously, it's a significant decision, and that's not a position we would want to be in. So, in summary, on balance, I think the motion can continue in its current format, but essentially, if it was carried, the decision would effectively rest on the shoulders of the chair. We're asked for review from my perspective. There are some grey areas around the use of urgency provisions, so I'm not sure it's something I would recommend necessarily, but in legal terms, that's the position as I see it.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Having heard what the monitoring officer has just said, if this motion were to pass, then the chair was to go against the wishes of the council, then I think some major questions need to be asked by all of us in the chamber, including those in his own party, as to why he's chairing such an important position within the council and going against the wishes of this chamber. Why would anyone want to risk millions of pounds of investment, hundreds of jobs, and the future of Teesside itself for petty party political point scoring exercise? Delaying this application beyond the 7th of March risks not only the momentum, but tangible economic benefits and the resurgence of a critical industry. Further, it's been publicly acknowledged by a member of the Labour Party, who sadly isn't here today, that he has a shared commitment across the aisle not to hinder the process of bringing steelmaking back to Teesside. It was Councillor Rob Clark who, on social media, in an interesting conversation we were having, just said, has any of the Labour councillors said they want to stop steelmaking on Teesside or even delay this application? No, they have not. I hope all members across the floor can see the merit of Councillor Clark's words, and in this motion, and in doing so, vote accordingly in favour for it. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, it may of course be that there are some concerns, so let's hear them in a few minutes' time. But I emphasise again, there have been no objections to this planning application. We as council should never allow the manipulation of due process to be so adapted that it serves a singular political interest rather than the public interest. In my motion, as laid out, I said I wanted to see the application determined on the 7th of March. This date is non-negotiable for the reasons I have already stated, and if anyone does so wish to amend the date, we will be rejecting this amendment outright, as it does not serve the interests of the public to delay this application. In so doing, I would have to ask, does this council want to bring steelmaking back to Teesside? Do we really want the investment? Do we want a future? Or do we want to put the brakes on this project going forward for cheap political point scoring because one man has a vendetta against the Tees Valley Mayor? Because that's what it's increasingly looking like. And while I might make a few people in this chamber very pleased with themselves, outside the walls, people are getting increasingly angry at the delaying, the dithering, the political point scoring, and I don't blame them. The public can see on some of the benches a vacuum of vision, an abyss of ambition, and an excess of ego that's being allowed to uphold the very future of our region. If there are still matters to be resolved, let's address them with urgency they deserve. Let's not put the barriers up and say we can't, because this is Teesside and we can. This motion is about adding an application to an agenda. It's not about the final decision, it's merely about time, it's about promises made, and it's about progress. Once our elected members have the information, it's still their choice. By voting for this motion, we will be signalling to the community, and indeed potential investors from around the world, that Redcar and Cleveland Council is open for business, is committed to economic development, and is wanting to create jobs as it has promised. It's about showing that we can act swiftly and decisively when the stakes are high. It's about keeping promises made to investors at the very start of this process that 7th of March will be met. In conclusion, I urge members, irrespective of party affiliation, to consider the broader implications of this motion. This is not my motion. This is not even a Conservative motion. This is a motion for the people of Teesside who deserve a job, deserve prosperity, and they deserve a chance. Let's put politics aside and focus on the potential benefits that reviving the steel industry could bring to our region.
Conclusion, please.
Sorry? Yeah, I'm literally got 3 lines here. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Let's demonstrate our collective commitment to Teesside's future. Let's be clear one final time. There is no legal reason why this application cannot be heard on the 7th of March. There is no environmental issues with this application. There are no objections to this application. There is no reason at all why this application should have been called in the first place. I respectfully request that this planning application be added to the agenda for consideration by the Regulatory Committee on the 7th of March 24. Thank you all for your time and consideration. All members have the British Steel motion in writing in the notes that were sent out. I propose the motion as set out in the papers. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hargreaves, are you second to this motion? And do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are bringing this forward, we brought this motion forward today, and it's not a case of accelerating the project like some people have you believe, but it's the case of the council delivering the project on time and delivering this jobs and investment which will benefit not only my residents, but everyone's residents in the whole borough. A project of this scale will bring sizable income to this council, and like we've heard today, much needed for important local services across the board. This application represents huge importance to the future prosperity of the borough, and Councillor Salvin has brought this motion forward as the application's significance warrants it being heard at the next available meeting date, which is the 7th of March, and there is no legal reason why this application cannot be heard on that date. The motion is primarily about protecting the council's reputation and showing outside investors that this council is serious about private investment. We allegedly promised that this application would be heard on the 7th of March, and there is no legal reason why this should not be heard on that date. This council has a long, proud history of working alongside British Steel, and every one of us sat here today should be doing whatever we can to support British Steel in their mission to bring steelmaking back to Teesside. Moving on to the point around members not having enough time to read the papers, this motion was circulated to all members on the 21st of February, and if the members of the Regulatory Committee so wished, they could familiarise themselves with all the documents online through the online portal, which is available to all the public and members as well. And as of this morning when I checked, there are still no objections to this application. The Chairman of the Regulatory Committee has the power to add any urgent items to the agenda on the 7th of March. Therefore, if this motion is passed today by a majority of the members, the Chairman will have a choice. He will either act upon the will of his council or will act upon the will of his own interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got 7, 8 people going to speak now, so I'm going to make it strict that they stick to the 5 minutes. Lynn Pallister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I love Teesside as well. I love Redcar and Cleveland even better. Obviously, the Labour group, we're in support of investment and jobs. Why wouldn't we be? We're happy to support the motion if Councillor Salvin would just change bullet point 1 and 5 to support the return of steel production. Thank you.
Right, can that be agreed? Do we alter that one? Hands up, please. Right, carried. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do hold some sympathy with the Chair of Regulatory. I don't think. I think a lot of whilst I support your sentiment, and we can't do anything to hinder British Steel. In fact, myself and the managing director were the ones that met with the Chinese to promise this timeline, and we wouldn't hinder and we would help as much as we possibly can. Politics needs to start with it. You know, you mentioned the mayor, the Tees Valley mayor. You know, whether or not the mayor was there, let's remember it's a business decision by the Chinese, and let's remember we're talking about 2,000 people in Scunthorpe, steel makers, that are going to lose their job as a direct result of that. So let's not blow this up to the massive politics that it perceived to be. So what I need clarity on, though, monitoring officer, is there is absolutely no legal way we're holding ourselves open by hurrying this, because I believe the public consultation finishes on the 3rd of March. Is that correct? And as long as we're not opening ourselves to any challenge or another 30-day consultation, if anything comes in that time frame, then we're happy to support it. But we do need clarity that we're not holding the council open for any sort of legal challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In fairness, I don't think I could give a guarantee in that regard. As I said, there are some grey areas around the use of an urgency procedure. Aside from that, whilst they're not strict legal reasons, my understanding from the planning team is there are some outstanding issues in terms of the application, which, if it's possible to get through them, would be very rushed. So procedurally, this would be unusual. Whenever you have some unusual circumstances in a procedure, then that does give rise to the potential challenge. How substantive or valid that challenge would be, I'm not sure, but for example, my understanding from some notes from the planning team is that the statutory consultation doesn't finish till the 3rd, so if there are any last minute comments, there would need to be analysis of those. There's also an issue with the ecology because Natural England were felt to be on track to support this, but what they've done is said they've not got sufficient information on the proposal's anticipated emissions to air and water to provide substantive advice. So this means that there is an issue in that regard. Effectively, they've handed that over to us to deal with by way of conditions, and we have an ecological consultant dealing with that, but nothing back from them yet, as I understand it. So there is a lot of work to do. I think, if I'm being objective, the planning officer's advice would be this planning application is not ready to come to committee on the 7th, but that's a procedural issue rather than a legal one.
I'm still just as confused as I was before you started talking, Steve. So financially, the council's not at risk? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm not saying that. It's a significant decision. If somebody wanted to challenge it, then if you do something in an unusual way, that opens the door to a challenge. Whether that could succeed or not, I don't know.
Right, okay. Well, Councillor Pallister's already stated our position. Unless we hear otherwise from any of us in the chamber, we're happy to support the motion and ask that we keep politics out of the future of the borough.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, Alec, you've asked the questions that I was wanting. I think everybody wants to bring the steel making back to Teesside, but is a week going to make a difference? An emergency meeting on 21st, for example, is that going to make a massive difference to ensure that people have time to read the papers? We don't open. The monitoring officers had already said there are issues. It's rushed. It's going against planning advice. I don't think this is political. I think, you know, it was brought up by Councillor Solvin that, you know, following due process, which is what is being asked to be done here. And I don't think anybody's saying that it can't be brought forward full stop, but putting us at any sort of risk of missing something, last minute objections coming, anything, it just seems that the date of closure to the date of the meeting is about 2-3 working days. What's another week? What's another fortnight? So I just think no multinational Chinese organisation is going to walk away for the sake of 10 days or 14 days after they've come this far, just to make sure that we've covered everything, read everything. You know, it's positive for the borough, it's positive for the area, everybody wants it, but we don't want to miss the trick and end up, you know, subject to the slight chance that something else can happen for the sake of a week. Sorry.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, of course, we all want to see steel production back in the Redcar and Cleveland area. And it saddens me that this full council appears to be being used as a bit of a political football between certain individuals. And I do have concerns that if this application comes to the regulatory committee for the 7th of March, well, I think really it's not achievable. Because as I understand it, the report at the moment is 100 pages in length. And of course, we have items on the agenda already set for the 7th. And sometimes it's difficult for, well, I shouldn't be saying this, but for some councillors even to read the report for that meeting. And also, there is issues with ecology in relation to the actual application. We have a meeting on the 3rd of April. What is the issue for it to be brought to that meeting, and so that we can read the report in full and take on board what is quite a complicated application? Thank you.
Councillor Leroy.
Before I commence, can the General Manager of the Council just confirm to me when the purdah period is for the Tees Valley Mayor campaign?
Sorry, do you mean the Managing Director?
General Manager, Managing Director, yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the purdah period starts on the 19th.
Yep, so therefore, I think this is more the reason why we want to see a change of committee. Can the monitoring officer just confirm to me the wording of 1.2 100B4 of the Local Government Act 1972 as it talks about urgent business and the conditions thereof?
If you just give me 1 second, Councillor.
I can read it if you like. You can confirm it.
Okay, I have got it here, but
Yeah.
yes.
So it talks about where reasons by special circumstances shall be specified. So we need special circumstances. I can confirm at this point that British Steel has not reached out to the development officers, the planning officers, or myself for a change of date. Indeed, a joint partner has, the Tees Mayor has, a chief executive of another authority has, but British Steel have not. So therefore I don't deem that the special circumstances have been reached. It's not by sheer chance that I end up in this role as planning committee chair. I myself have a law degree, and I was a regulator of a health profession, a major health profession, when I was only 27. So I have a great deal of experience in terms of regulatory affairs. With regards to this application, there is one outstanding environmental report, as has been heard. The option is to then monitor for a year upon granting, and we would have to grant if we went for the 3rd of March within a paper which would come without any recommendation. Now, as somebody who is also a global director of a multinational firm, I would also add that one thing that business wants is surety. British Steel are sure that on the 4th we would have a full planning application. If we were to receive it on the 7th, we would have anything but. So my recommendation is that we leave due process to the planning officers and experts who will then inform me and fellow council members of when an application is ready. I must say, finally, that I'm very disappointed that we are commenting on a live planning application during a consultation period in this chamber. The Regulatory Committee is a semi-judicial, quasi-judicial body, and we should not be interfering with its operation. Thank you.
Councillor Hadaway.
As far as I understand it, we councillors can only consider motions that are brought before us, and therefore we're entitled to think of them as legitimate motions because they've been brought before us. It seems a very strange situation, because obviously we want to support bringing steel making back to Teesside, and it seems quite strange, given that the motions go through the monitoring officer in order to get here, and the wording is looked at and they're approved, that he should then be telling us there are other considerations within the institution that might affect the motion being implemented. Could I seek some clarity on that, please?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what point you're making, Councillor.
The issue is implementing it. How did it get here? Because it came through your approval.
In strict legal terms, I think on balance it can be implemented, but obviously only through the urgency procedures. So we can't bypass those because they're in primary legislation and they make the reference to the chair of the committee. It's not for me to advise on, you know, the wiseness or otherwise of motions. I just take a strict legal approach.
So in that case, the motion as written is a legitimate motion that we can vote upon.
Yes, in legal terms, subject to the caveat that the chair then would have to authorise it. You can vote on it. Yeah.
Sorry, there's no caveat to us voting on it.
No, the motion could be carried, but there would still be a need for the chairman's involvement because of the urgency procedure in the legislation.
In that case, we support the motion.
I have no problems with the motion. I think it's a brilliant motion. But you're getting your answer now by the monitoring officer and by the chair of regulatory. It looks like you're not going to get what you want. And, you know, you need to understand the timings of this motion are completely wrong. I don't know why you've waited so long for this application. This application was received by this authority on the 24th of November last year. It was then duly amended to incorporate some changes on the 24th of January. So it's at least another month you've had, from what I understand. I do agree with the sentiment of the motion, but if this motion is passed, you could be setting a precedent for any future planning applications which could seriously affect local planning applications and the democratic process. It's already been mentioned that the closing date for this public consultation is on Sunday, the 3rd of March, which is just days away, and this motion could actually deny anybody from making comments. The timings are important, even if the motion is passed today. Would it give officers time to prepare the reports? I doubt it very much. As we said, someone said it's a 100-page report. I've been through it, and it's obviously a very complex thing. I don't have any degrees, I don't have any O-levels, I'm afraid, so I do struggle. Now, you state in your motion, and I'm going to quote you on this, should the application be delayed, it may risk hundreds of new steel-making jobs and the return of steel-making to Teesside. Can you confirm where you sourced this risk from and identify it, please? That is very important. There is, though, and I don't care what people say, of course there's a political part to this motion. Now, through personal choice, I'm not on social media, but I have research assistants, right? And I'm not going to tell you who they are. And they passed on to me the following quote from my local MP, Sir Simon Clarke. And you've got to listen very carefully to this. And it reads as follows, and I'm going to quote, "If the motion is carried, the council can sidestep Councillor Leroyd's attempts at delaying the major project ahead of May's mayoral elections." Now, why would he say that? I'll leave that thought with you, though. But thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't planning on speaking, but just because a few concerns have been raised. First of all, you know, we've obviously discussed with the monitoring officer whether this would be legal. Of course we have, and of course it wouldn't be here today if it wasn't legal. We've also had clarity on whether members voting on this motion today, whether if they're on the planning committee, it will be then predetermined in the application. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be predetermined in the application. We've had that clarity. In terms of why this date is important, it's because the council has promised in informal talks, we understand, and I think that's a general understanding around most of the chamber, this council has promised that it would be done by the 7th of March. And the issue we have, if we falter on our promises to businesses, especially when we've got the Tees work site down there, if we start faltering on our promises, it will damage some faith that businesses have in this council's ability to get planning applications done in a timely manner. So that's the issue at hand. I don't think it's a political one. I think it's this council's made a promise. Let's deliver on that promise if we can together. I think that's all I have to say, really. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barry Hunt.
Couldn't stand up there. The old legs have gone. The belly hasn't, but the legs have. In the immortal words of an ex-leader and councillor, George Dunning, he would have said, as an ex-steel worker, well, I'm an ex-steel worker, and I also was a resident of Dormanstown, which was built for steel workers. So I'm just going to say, let's get our acts together, get it right, and get steel back on Teesside, get some jobs. So there we go.
Councillor Brown, you've got your light on again, but I can't allow you a second question. You're still up, Paul.
There we go. I'll sum up as best I can. I've not obviously done this before. Now, I think it's all raised fair and valid points, Councillor Brown, Councillor King, about the legality. But like I say, it's been through the monitoring officer's due process. To say it's been a busy week for me is an understatement. We've had calls, we've had discussions, about this, that, because obviously what we don't want to do is bring a illegal motion to council, because that doesn't benefit anyone. Councillor Smith, I do get your point, but are we going to put barriers up in the way of progress? Like, are we saying we can't do it because we actually can? Yes, I do see your points. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done. It can be done. With the will of this council, if they want to do it, it can be done. Bill, as Councillor Pugh's just alluded to, yeah, because this council's made a promise, we need to stick. Well, I've seen the paper.
Have interruptions in members' speeches, please.
Yeah, and if this council doesn't stick to its promises, what signal does that send out to the rest of the world? Come and put an application in. We'll promise you this date, and it might be done for then. We can't say it's going to be done for then. It might be done for a years after that. Like, well, what kind of signal does that send to the rest of the world? And Councillor Hunt, my sentiment entirely on what you said. It's about time that we just stop talking about these things and just get it done. Just get these applications through as promised and get things done. And I'm done, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
By Councillor Hargreaves. Can we never vote on it, whether we accept the motion, please? I need 15 members to hands up to have a recorded vote. Not 15 members, so it's a vote of hands, please. All in favour? Carried. A list of changes to members on committees, but I only intend to take 2 because the other ones have no names attached to it. So I have 2, Councillor Barry Hunt to remain on the Committee of Climate and Scrutiny as an independent representative, and Councillor Martin Fletch to remain on the Committee of Regularity as an independent group member. Can I propose that we accept those appointments, please? Alex, sorry.
So, just as a matter, I brought up the minutes from the previous meeting. If we could possibly change Jade Laven on the harm houses to me, please.
On the which one?
The harm houses, which isn't on that list you're looking at, it's from the previous meeting.
We'll do that, yeah. So that's appoint members on the 3 committees. Can I have a vote? Sorry, Councillor. Are we voting? Yeah, sorry. It's carried. Now, we only have 10 minutes. Now, I can take the question.
Mr. Mayor, could I please make a comment that for 9 months now we've been underrepresented on the corporate parenting board and nobody's nominated themselves to come forward, And I think 9 months of a vacancy of one of our most important committees is long enough, and I would like a decision made today, if possible, to appoint a member to take that place. 9 months is too long to have underrepresentation on one of our most important committees. Thank you.
It's got to be an independent group. If there's nobody from independent, we'll take it from the floor. Alec, can I propose that we accept Alec onto the... You're nobody else. You're carried, you're Alec, you're on that committee.
Had enough, so I've withdrawn, so I'd be happy if there was a space to go on it again, because I was quite keen.
You withdraw. Can I have anybody else that's interested to go on that committee? Councillor Belshaw, you want to go? Right, can I have a show of hands to Councillor Belshaw? It's carried again.
13, I'm quite prepared to have my 2 questions given in written form.
That's question 4 and question 5 in written form for from Councillor Quartermain. Is that okay? Right. Bring us to the other questions. Can we have a 15-minute increase in time just to take them? No. 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 Okay. Right. We're taking Councillor Ovens' question first, and that the other 2 will be answered.
More than happy to submit it in writing and have it circulated to all members with a response.
Okay. Councillor are you quite happy, Councillor Joyce?
Well, and answered in writing, but could I also ask that that is done because it wasn't done on the last one, and I'd really like it in writing. Back to me. Do you, would you like, if you want to show off, we can do it.
Order, please.
It's really important that you get it in writing.
Would you like your question in writing?
I'd like to say it. So I can either say it today or next council, but it'd be more pertinent this one. Quickly? Well, it's a yes, no answer. Will the leader and cabinet please sign a letter to Historic England calling on relevant finds at South of Bath to be scheduled and protected so that future generations can learn about North East Yorkshire's until now largely forgotten past?
I'll answer him at the next one, if that's all right. No, I'm joking. Historic England will be the decision maker on whether or not any areas on the land south of Bath will be scheduled due to their archaeological merit. This will depend on what actually is found on the site, as the archaeology is assessed over the coming weeks, months. The council does not have any role in this decision making the process, so will rightly reserve the decision for Historic England to make this bearing in mind. Elected members will consider the content of any letter presented and due consideration decide to sign it at the appropriate time. And again, Tristan, just like I was very nervous about leaving the council up to legal challenge, I'm also very nervous about leaving any challenge from the developers, and therefore the council being fined. Okay, but rest assured, if they find more things of significance, more than happy to sign for the elected members.
Right. Writing as soon as possible, please. The other ones. Any supplementary questions? No, it's Leroy.
So, Councillor Brown, you're still confusing revocation of planning permission with scheduling process. I mean, that's just been shown in the way that you voted and completely disregarded planning rules. You need to question your position or even commenting on planning applications. My next question would be, the area that's planned for this site and the development is outside the limits of Mask by the Sea. It's over the railway line. This has been recognised in all local plans in the past. Would the Cabinet please consider calling the area which is south of the railway line not Mask by the Sea but south of Mask?
I've just called it the south of Mask in my answer to you, Tristan. Well, I'm not the Lord Mayor, I'm not the Twitter of cities and towns, but I've just called it the south of Mask to you, Tristan. I appreciate there's some fallout from the previous decision, but I did, you know, voice my sympathy with yourself that it all seems to be pointed on just one position, the chair of regulatory. I'm not going to go back to agenda items because I can't, but I answered your question and I said if they find anything of significance, more than the over of they have, we'll happy, as said in my answer, we'll all sign it. Oh, well, I can't say we'll all sign it, but happy to. So I don't think that should affect my position, but I am sympathetic with you, Tristan.
Thompson have a supplementary question. Would this be allowed at the next meeting, or will they be allowed to do this in writing and get a written answer circulated to all members?
When they get the answer in writing, then we can take it up again. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you for all attending.
Please just stand in.